Hey detectives! Welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Michael Haight. Michael Haight was born on January 7, 1980, in Seattle, Washington. As a child, his family moved to Cedar City, Utah. As a child, Michael enjoyed regular kid activities like baseball, basketball, and soccer. He was also an Eagle Scout and did well in school. After graduating from high school in 1998, Michael spent a summer working at a fish plant in Alaska. He quickly rose to the position of line manager, supervising over a dozen people. His work ethic and dedication were recognized, leading to his promotion. A hardworking member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, Michael went on a mission trip to southern Brazil. This experience strengthened his faith and commitment to his community. After returning to the United States, Michael attended Southern Utah University, graduating with a business degree in 2004. While at the university, Michael met his future wife, Tasha Earle. They fell in love and were married at St. George's Temple on May 10, 2003. Michael seemed to be the epitome of a hardworking husband and father. He coached his children's sports teams, attended school concerts, and spent time with them skiing and doing projects in the garage. However, on January 4, 2023, a shocking discovery exposed the dark reality of Michael's family life. That day, police found 8 bodies in Michael's home, leaving police and neighbors stunned and baffled. The alarm was raised when Tasha Haight missed an online appointment and her husband Michael did not show up for work, prompting worried co-workers to call the police and request a welfare check at the family's home. Officers went to Michael's Enoch home, but no one answered when they knocked. Upon further inspection, the home appeared to be empty. Since Michael's family had 5 children, officers contacted the Iron County School District to check if any children were at school. They discovered that no children were there. When officers arrived at Michael's home, the Michaels lived in a 1-story home with a basement. Detectives arrived shortly after the home was designated a crime scene. Upon entering the master bedroom, they found 4-year-old Gavin lying face down, his head turned to the left. One of his arms was propped up under his head on a pillow, and a blanket partially covered his body. Tasha was similarly covered, with only part of her body under the blanket. On the other side of the bed, police found an older woman, later identified as Gail Earle, Tasha's mother. Gail was lying on her back with her head on a pillow, and was also partially covered with a blanket, as were her daughter and grandson. When police searched Michael's home, they came across Bryn's room. Inside, they found the 12-year-old girl lying on the bed, slightly elevated and partially covered with a blanket. When they entered Amon's room, police found a 7-year-old boy lying face down in the corner. Notably, unlike his siblings, he had no pillow or blanket. Sienna, Amon's twin sister, was found in her bedroom, lying on her left side on the bed with her head on a pillow, covered with a blanket. Michael's oldest child, Macy, 17, was also found on the bed, her head on a pillow and her body covered with a blanket. Police later located Michael in the basement gym, where he was lying on a sleeping bag. Each of the 8 victims suffered fatal gunshot wounds. It didn't take long for police to identify Michael Haight as the prime suspect. They believe he killed his wife, mother-in-law, and 5 children before taking his own life. As the investigation began, a neighbor shared important information that helped police create a timeline of events. The neighbor reported that she woke up at 3:30 a.m. to use the bathroom and heard a loud bang that sounded like fireworks. However, she knew that the day fireworks were allowed in the neighborhood had passed, which made her feel uneasy. The neighbor went on to say that after the first bang, she heard 2 more bangs in quick succession. This noise was followed by a short pause, then several more bangs. Police suspect that the loud noises the neighbor heard around 3:30 a.m. were related to the brutal murder that occurred that night, which they believe was committed by Michael. During the investigation, police learned that a non-family member had reported the abuse to the Department of Child Services in 2020. The person spoke with Macy, then 14, and she shared her fears about her father, leading to a further investigation into the Michael family. After receiving the report, child welfare and child protection agencies interviewed Macy and her parents separately. During Macy's interview, she shared alarming details. She mentioned instances where her father choked her, leaving her in fear for her life. Macy revealed that these violent incidents began in 2017. One incident involved her father grabbing her by the shoulders and pushing her against a piece of wooden furniture. When police spoke with Macy's father, Michael, he denied harming his daughter. He downplayed the seriousness of the incidents Macy described, calling them a misunderstanding. Michael attributed his emotional state to the death of his father and his brother's recent divorce. Michael admitted to taking his frustrations out on his eldest daughter. However, his wife, Tasha, chose not to file a criminal complaint against him. After an investigation, Child Protective Services, the Enoch Police Department, and the Iron County District Attorney's Office also decided not to prosecute because the case did not meet the criteria for prosecution. Additionally, a fatality assessment was conducted with Tasha, and according to her response, it did not indicate that her relationship with Michael was fatal. However, victim support services were provided to Tasha and the children in the months after the case was opened. Through conversations with Tasha's friends, the police developed a different view of Michael than the one he presented to the public. When visiting Tasha, her friends would often leave the kitchen faucet on to hide their conversations because Tasha suspected Michael was eavesdropping. To avoid giving Michael a reason to yell at Tasha, her friends would also help her with housework. Whenever they texted Tasha, she would reply with short, positive messages, possibly knowing that Michael might be reading them. This behavior suggested that Tasha was trying to maintain a positive appearance in front of Michael, implying that their marriage was not in trouble. Police investigating the case discovered that Michael displayed a high level of control over his wife, Tasha. He exercised this control in a variety of ways, including confiscating her car keys and phone to restrict her freedom. Additionally, Michael's reaction when Tasha purchased a $30 rug from Walmart to replace her dirty carpet raised further suspicions about his behavior. Tasha needed to buy a rug, but her husband, Michael, was angry and said it was a waste of money. Tasha talked to her friends about how her 7-year-old son, Amon, had begun to act like his father, imitating his father's bad behavior. When Tasha asked Amon to do something, he would say, "That's not my job," which worried Tasha because it showed that Amon was not taking responsibility and was not listening to her. This is similar to how Michael often ignores or dismisses Tasha's requests, and it seems that Amon is adopting similar habits. In 2022, Tasha made the rare decision to get a manicure as an act of self-care. However, her husband, Michael, objected and tried to limit her freedom. Despite this, Tasha still felt younger and more confident after getting her nails done. She decided to make this a monthly habit, but Michael strongly objected because of cost concerns. Tasha explained that it would only cost $25 a month, but Michael was still unconvinced. He argued that spending money on her nails would take away from the needs of her children, demonstrating a controlling attitude and a strong sense of financial responsibility. At the same time, Tasha began taking better care of herself and losing weight. This came after years of her husband, Michael, calling her fat and ugly. However, instead of being supportive, Michael becomes angry when she loses weight. He accuses her of being unfaithful, trying to explain away her change in appearance. Michael's controlling behavior escalates as he tries to order Tasha to stop losing weight. He begs her to stop because he fears that other men will find her attractive. This demand stems from his own deep insecurities and his need to control his wife's body and actions. Tasha's friends report an incident involving the family's kitchen table to the police. The table is broken and Tasha needs to replace it. However, her husband, Michael, refuses to provide the necessary funds. Frustrated by the situation, Tasha decides to take matters into her own hands. She decides to refurbish the old table, hoping to improve its appearance and functionality. Michael is unhappy with this decision because Tasha did not ask for his permission. This is not the first time this has happened. During the holiday season, Michael was very frugal with the family finances. Despite earning a substantial income from his job at All 8, he only gave $100 to each child for Christmas gifts. Tasha always wanted to give her children a full Christmas, but Michael's reluctance to add money made this difficult. He believed his income was legitimate and did not feel the need to provide more for the family. Michael's intense focus on reducing waste and conserving resources leads him to impose strict household rules on Tasha. She is required to wash and reuse plastic bags, no matter how many times they have been used. This adds to Tasha's responsibilities, leaving her feeling overwhelmed. Additionally, Michael's need for control also affects Tasha's hygiene and childcare habits. Michael requires Tasha to use wipes and, claiming that it is better for the environment and will save money. However, this makes Tasha feel uncomfortable and stressed. If she does not follow Michael's instructions, he will punish her severely. He makes it clear that disobedience will lead to a lot of trouble for her. This threat creates a sense of fear and submission in Tasha, leaving her with no choice but to comply with Michael's demands. According to Tasha's friends, she shared with them that Michael's abuse was initially directed at her during their marriage. However, in the late 2010s, Michael began abusing their children as well. Macy suffered greatly as the abuse escalated. Michael put a lot of pressure on Macy to get straight A's. The burden of these unrealistic expectations became too much for Macy to bear. Macy's friends reported another disturbing incident to the police. One evening, Michael came home to find Macy sitting with her head in her mother's lap. He became angry and told Macy to get up and clean her room. This left Macy deeply disturbed, as she recalled looking into her father's eyes and seeing hatred and evil. Police also discovered an incident involving 7-year-old Briley, who was playing with a changing table and would not stop when Michael told her to stop. This led Michael to blame his wife, Tasha, for their children's behavior, calling them the worst kids in the world, disrespectful and horrible. Furthermore, Michael would insult Tasha, calling her fat and ugly, all in front of their 5 children. Tasha decided to end her 20-year marriage to Michael after his abusive behavior and uncontrollable rages. This event made her realize the harm it was causing their children, and she knew she had to leave the marriage. Although the divorce was difficult for Tasha after 2 decades together, she prioritized the safety and well-being of her children over her commitment to the marriage. On December 21, 2022, Tasha filed for divorce from her husband, Michael. However, she requested that the divorce papers be delivered after the holidays, wanting one last normal Christmas for her 5 children before separating. Tasha anticipated that Michael's behavior would worsen once the papers were delivered, and she sought to shield their children from potential repercussions during the holidays. The divorce papers were delivered to Michael at his office on December 27th. Michael contacted Tasha and conversed as if nothing out of the ordinary had happened. During the call, he asked Tasha to leave their home but demanded that she leave their children behind. Tasha was adamant that she would not leave without the children. Tasha took the children to her mother's house in Lynn, Utah, despite Michael's objections. That evening, Michael went to his mother-in-law's house and asked Tasha to go out with him, but she refused. Tasha told friends that she felt uneasy being alone with Michael. After Tasha filed for divorce, her mother, Gail Earle, moved in to support Tasha and the children. However, Michael's behavior made the situation worse. Instead of leaving the house, Michael moved into the basement, which also served as a gym. He slept on a sleeping bag on the floor, used a pillow, and hung his clothes on a hanger on a couch outside the door. Tasha shared her concerns with her friends about a major problem she had discovered. She discovered that $220,000 had disappeared from the children's savings accounts. After further investigation, she discovered that Michael was responsible for secretly transferring money without telling her. Additionally, Tasha inherited several weapons from her late father, including shotguns and handguns. However, in early January 2023, she noticed that all of these weapons were missing from her home. A subsequent investigation revealed that Michael had taken these weapons, leaving Tasha and her family unprotected and vulnerable in the event of an emergency. Macy, the eldest daughter of Michael and Tasha, has told several friends that she supports her parents' divorce. She feels that the presence of her father, Michael, in the home has caused tension and she wishes for peace in the separation. Macy has even taken steps to document her father's behavior, secretly recording him with a hidden phone when he acts erratically. She has confided to a friend that she is gathering evidence to support her parents' divorce. However, her mother, Tasha, found the phone and took it away. Macy's younger sister, Briley, faced a difficult home life due to constant trouble. To escape, Briley often went to a neighbor's house, where she found comfort in playing with the neighbor's grandchildren, who were children about her age. She told a friend that she was really relieved when her parents got divorced and was even looking forward to buying some new books, but she didn't dare tell her father because she was afraid he would be angry. On January 3, 2023, Tasha met with her attorney to discuss her divorce from her abusive husband Michael. At the time, Michael was still living in the family home, but had recently moved into the basement, which provided Tasha with some relief. Her attorneys asked her if she ever felt concerned for her safety or that of her children because of Michael's erratic behavior. Despite Michael's occasional outbursts, Tasha told her attorneys that she never felt her safety or that of her children was threatened. In retrospect, it is clear that Tasha's optimism and misplaced trust in her husband were tragically misplaced. The investigation into the shooting of Michael Haight's family was a difficult and disturbing process for police as they reconstructed the events that led to the tragedy. A chilling discovery emerged from digital evidence collected from the family's computers and cell phones. On December 30th, just days before the shooting, Michael made a disturbing Google search at 10:41 p.m. He searched for information about guns and shootings, which, combined with other evidence, suggested a dark intent. Search queries included questions about how loud a 9mm gun is, how to recognize a gunshot, and what to do if you hear a gunshot in your neighborhood. In a letter Michael wrote before he took his own life, he said he would rather rot in hell than endure what he described as his wife's controlling behavior. Michael expressed that he could not endure the situation for another day and was determined to end the manipulation and control he had endured. Michael's letter expressed deep frustration and despair. He had repeatedly asked for help, but no one seemed to listen. In this letter, Michael emphasized his determination not to become a burden to society. The details of the letter he left behind shocked and disbelieving many. Michael's actions were calculated and premeditated. He had planned the murder carefully, ensuring that his wife and children would not find out until it was too late. Hello friends. Welcome to our channel. Today, we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Luz Maria Lopez. Luz Maria Lopez was born on March 17, 1995, in San Cristobal Verapaz, a small town, to a modest family of A. Morales and Brian Lopez. She was the youngest of two children, with an older brother named Omar. In infancy, Luz Maria faced a life-threatening intestinal obstruction that required a complex operation. Despite the doctor's uncertainty, her mother's prayers and faith in her recovery paid off, and the surgery was successful. Fortunately, the early surgery did not affect her development. During her school years, Luz Maria was an active and well-rounded student. She participated in gymnastics, athletics, and classical dance, and was a people person who easily made friends. She also excelled academically, particularly in the humanities. After graduation, Luz Maria decided to pursue higher education at a prestigious state university, where she chose to study law and later specialized in criminalistics, a field that had always fascinated her. When Luz Maria was a student, she accompanied her mother to a car dealership in Coban, the capital of Alta Verapaz, to buy a motorcycle as a 25th birthday gift for her older brother. They met a polite and attentive young consultant named Jorge, who showed them various models and offered recommendations. Although Luz Maria and her mother chose a model, they decided to think it over and consult with the rest of the family before making a decision. Before leaving, Luz Maria gave Jorge her phone number in case they needed further feedback. Shortly after, Jorge called Luz Maria, but instead of discussing the potential purchase, their conversation turned personal. Luz. He continued to call her several times before mustering the courage to invite her to a coffee shop. It was clear that he was smitten with the beautiful brunette, but didn't know how to initiate their acquaintance. Luz Maria was immediately drawn to a handsome young man, and when he asked to meet, she agreed. The only potential obstacle was that he was a year younger, but that didn't deter them. A romantic relationship quickly blossomed, and they both felt an intense connection, believing they had found true love. After just a few months, they decided to take the next step and start living together. Despite their parents' disapproval, they pressed on and got married 6 months later. They kept the wedding intimate, inviting only close friends and family. However, the celebration was almost ruined on the wedding day when the banquet venue encountered an unexpected issue. The couple had to pay a significant amount of extra money to salvage the event, but they were eventually able to go ahead with the ceremony as planned. Jorge is a mysterious figure, and there is limited information available about him in the public domain. What is known is that he was born in 1996 in the town of Santa Catalina Latina, Guatemala. Jorge grew up with his brother Pablo in a low-income family, where financial struggles were a constant reality. As a result, the brothers had to make do with the basics and didn't have the luxury of nice clothes or expensive toys. Contrary to what one might expect, Jorge didn't have big aspirations or ambitions. He never made an effort to study or find a good job, and instead, he took things as they came. Those who knew Jorge described him as introverted, uncommunicative, and sometimes aggressive. He struggled with controlling his emotions, which made it difficult for him to form meaningful relationships or connect with the opposite sex. Despite these challenges, Jorge was determined to win the heart of Luz Maria, the love of his life. He went all out to impress her, and once she agreed to marry him, he was in a hurry to seal the deal, fearing she might change her mind. Luz Maria's parents, however, were not convinced about Jorge from the start. They had reservations about their son-in-law, although they couldn't quite put their finger on what bothered them. Despite their misgivings, they couldn't persuade their daughter to reconsider her decision to marry Jorge. After the wedding, the young couple's marriage quickly became unhappy. The wife, Luz Maria, got pregnant, but she couldn't find a good job because she didn't have a university degree and was inexperienced. No employer wanted to hire an expectant mother with no skills, so she had to settle for casual labor. Meanwhile, her husband, Jorge, lost his job and showed no enthusiasm for finding a new one. When their daughter, Alice, was born, the family's financial situation became dire. Both Jorge and Luz Maria were unemployed and struggling to make ends meet. They couldn't even afford to pay rent, buy food, or purchase basic household necessities. Jorge convinced Luz Maria that they had no choice but to move in with his parents temporarily. Luz Maria was initially hesitant, but with a baby to care for and no other options, she eventually agreed. Her mother, was aware of the family's problems and encouraged Luz Maria to return to her childhood home, but Luz Maria insisted that things would improve with Jorge and there was no need to worry. Luz Maria's mother visited her daughter and granddaughter at her son-in-law's parents' house, but was met with a disturbing scene. Luz Maria was in a terrible condition, malnourished from only eating once a day. This was partly due to her in-laws not providing her with sufficient food, as they saw her as unemployed. The situation was even more concerning because Luz Maria was breastfeeding her baby, Alice, so her malnutrition could also harm the child's health. The lack of food was just one of the many problems Luz Maria faced in her in-laws' home. She was constantly humiliated and even physically abused by her husband's younger brother. He was irritated by the baby's crying and the presence of children's belongings in the house. He would lash out at Luz Maria, throwing her child's things at her, and on one occasion, even threw a baby bottle at her, hitting Alice, who was in her mother's arms. Jorge refused to stand up for his wife and daughter, treating them as if they were strangers. His mother-in-law, AA, convinced her daughter to take her granddaughter and move back to her parents' house. However, Jorge soon showed up, asking his wife to return and promising to get a job. She agreed, but only if their children could rent an apartment and live separately from his parents. After Luz Maria defended her diploma, she achieved her long-held dream. She landed a job at the city prosecutor's office, earning the respect of her colleagues with her intelligence, talent, and responsibility. As she advanced in her career, the family's financial situation significantly improved, eventually allowing them to afford a car. This improvement was entirely due to the wife's hard work, frugality, and strong reputation among her superiors. Jorge was a selfish and lazy person who relied on his wife, Luz Maria's income instead of working. He had a bad temper, was abusive, and controlled every aspect of Luz Maria's life. He wouldn't let her have friends, go out with colleagues, or even leave the house without him. He constantly checked her phone and social media, and even forbade her from using them. Jorge's behavior was extremely abusive, and he never stood up for Luz Maria when his relatives humiliated or physically abused her. He also used physical violence against her, treating her like his property. Despite this, Luz Maria repeatedly tried to leave him, but he would beg for forgiveness, and she would give him another chance. On December 15, 2020, after a violent fight, Luz Maria left Jorge and went to her mother's house with their 3-year-old daughter Alice. However, Jorge showed up, promising to change and claiming he had found a new job. Luz Maria believed him again and returned to their apartment. In mid-January 2021, Luz Maria called her mother, complaining about Jorge's broken promises and theft, which had left them in a desperate situation. However, Luz Maria stopped responding to calls and messages, which was unusual behavior for her. Her mother grew concerned and went to her workplace, only to find out that Luz Maria was missing. The police were informed, and a nationwide search effort began, with Jorge as the prime suspect. He denied any involvement, claiming he was also searching for his wife. However, the investigation revealed that Jorge was the last person to see Luz Maria alive, and he was the only suspect in her disappearance. Jorge was outraged and frustrated to be the prime suspect in his wife's disappearance, particularly since his own alibi was inconsistent and unclear. He struggled to explain why he hadn't reported her missing to the police on the day she vanished. If he thought she was at her mother's house, why didn't he call or visit her while the police were searching the area and looking for witnesses? On January 22nd, municipal workers made a gruesome discovery while responding to a call about a clogged storm drain. They found a large plastic bag containing a charred human body. Forensic experts confirmed that the body was that of a young woman. Her parents and brother identified the body as Luz Maria Lopez, despite its severe disfigurement. The body was discovered near the prosecutor's office where Luz Maria worked. Although the area lacked surveillance cameras and lighting, pathologists were able to determine that she had suffered severe beating and died from asphyxia. The evidence included internal hemorrhages, fractures sustained while she was alive, and caked blood particles in her nose and mouth. The investigation revealed that Luz Maria's husband, Jorge, was the prime suspect. A disturbing audio recording, sent anonymously by a neighbor, captured a brutal argument between the couple. The recording revealed Luz Maria's desperate screams and cries for help, as well as faint sobs in the background. Unfortunately, the neighbor who made the recording did not call the police or check on the source of the screams. Luz Maria's mother believes that if the neighbor had acted immediately, her daughter might still be alive. The recording was included in the case files, and Luz Maria's mother gave a powerful interview urging citizens to report incidents of domestic violence to the police rather than simply recording or filming them. Thousands of people protested across the country, demanding justice for Luz Maria. Although Jorge was arrested, he maintained his innocence, claiming he drove his wife to work on the day she vanished. However, security footage showed their car heading towards her workplace, but the tinted windows made it impossible to determine how many people were inside. At the couple's rented home, investigators found washed-out blood traces and drag marks, indicating that the brutal crime likely occurred there. This suspicion was strengthened by the discovery of microscopic fragments of burnt flesh in the trunk of the family car. A recent purchase by the couple, a double orthopedic mattress, caught the investigators' attention. Specifically, it was the dense polyethylene wrapping around the mattress that was significant. Comparative analysis revealed that Jorge had used this wrapping to conceal his wife's burnt remains. Several neighbors reported hearing Jorge threaten and insult his wife just days before her sudden disappearance. They recalled him shouting that he would kill her if she left him, and that he would hide her body where no one could find it. Based on the evidence collected by expert criminologists and witness testimonies, the investigation has reconstructed the horrific events of the crime. On the night of January 19, 2021, Jorge committed the murder, just one day after he and his wife had a violent argument. Jorge had a history of uncontrolled outbursts of anger, but this time he completely lost control. He brutally beat his wife, causing her to scream for help. The neighbors heard her cries but failed to call the police. During the beating, Jorge broke his wife's nose and inflicted a severe head injury. Afterwards, he strangled her with his bare hands and attempted to dispose of the body. To do so, he dragged her into the backyard, poured campfire liquid on her, and set her on fire. However, the intense smoke and smell of burning flesh and hair caught him off guard. The most disturbing aspect of the crime is that Jorge committed these atrocities in front of their 3.5-year-old daughter. Although she may not have fully understood what was happening, she witnessed the beating and murder, which was evident from her cries and screams that were recorded. Jorge, who had a basic understanding of forensic science from his wife's textbooks at home, attempted to cover up the crime and create an alibi. He deliberately chose a dark and secluded area without surveillance cameras to dispose of his wife Maria's body in a drainage sewer, escaping detection. The following morning, Jorge drove to Maria's workplace via their usual route, pretending to have dropped her off as he normally did every morning. Then, he began fabricating a search for his wife, contacting her co-workers, friends, and family. During the trial, Jorge's lawyers employed stall tactics to delay proceedings and discredit the investigation. They argued that all evidence and witness testimony was indirect and that there was no concrete proof to conclusively establish Jorge's guilt. Defense attorneys requested that Jorge's detention be changed to house arrest, citing his deep depression over being accused of killing the woman he loved and the mother of his child. However, crucial evidence came from Maria's phone, which had been in Jorge's possession since the crime. On the first day after the murder, Jorge used Maria's phone to send messages to various people, trying to create the illusion that she was still alive. Analysis of the phone's movements showed it was constantly in the same locations as Jorge's phone. The defense argued that Jorge had found his wife's phone and was driving around the city to search for her, but this claim was weakened by the fact that he had sent messages from her phone and even called it from his own phone. Further evidence of Jorge's guilt included the bruises and scratches on his body, documented by experts in photos, which suggested that the victim had put up a struggle. A notable scratch on his neck was particularly telling. While it was not possible to find Jorge's skin cells under the victim's fingernails due to the fire, the cumulative evidence pointed to his guilt. The prosecutor sought the maximum punishment for the defendant despite several contentious issues in the case. However, the court proceedings were frequently delayed. In October 2022, the defendant was finally convicted of brutally murdering his wife. He received a 50-year prison sentence, still maintaining his innocence. Custody of their young daughter, Alice, was awarded to her maternal grandparents. They expressed that caring for their granddaughter has now become the main purpose of their lives. In a world where the boundaries between love and horror, between compassion and betrayal, become increasingly blurred, we are confronted with a story that captures global attention. This is the tale of Jenna Oakley, a young woman whose life has descended into a haunting nightmare, entwined with passions, revenge, and sinister secrets. Through the eyes of those who have grappled with the dichotomy of good and evil, faith and betrayal, we delve into a narrative that prompts contemplation about the very essence of the human soul and the values that guide our decisions. Despite efforts by Jenna's legal team to argue for her confinement in a juvenile facility, Judge Darren Peckler decreed that she should face the consequences of her actions in an adult prison. As the verdict was delivered, the judge condemned the cruelty and senselessness of the crime against Rhonda, Jenna's stepmother. While Jenna was convicted, her father, Philip Oakley, remained plagued by questions about his daughter's motivations. Dissatisfied with the sentencing, Philip believed Jenna deserved a harsher punishment, lamenting the fact that she would only serve 15 years, while he, her brother, and Rhonda's children would endure a lifetime of pain and loss. But who is Jenna Oakley, and what drove an ordinary girl to commit such a heinous act, becoming enmeshed in a tale of tragedy? Let us delve into the depths of her soul together, seeking to unravel the motives behind her actions and grasp the true essence of this enigmatic personality. Jenna's upbringing was marked by hardship and neglect. Left alone at home from a young age, her mother's inability to provide a stable life left Jenna and her brother David vulnerable. The departure of her older stepsister, who had served as their guardian, further compounded their struggles. The neglect they endured was so severe that intervention by Child Protective Services became necessary, ultimately leading to their removal from their mother's care. In April of 2016, Jenna and David made the pivotal decision to move in with their father and his wife, Rhonda, a woman of 52 years at the time. Rhonda, from the outset, embraced her role as a stepmother wholeheartedly, treating her husband's children as her own. Those close to Rhonda and her husband later recounted how she had longed to be a nurturing presence in her stepchildren's lives, welcoming them into her home with warmth and sincerity. Little did anyone suspect that this seemingly ordinary transition would culminate in a harrowing tragedy. Despite Jenna's academic achievements and the praise she received from her teachers, she grappled with inner turmoil. Her rebellious nature made it challenging for her to adhere to the rules imposed in her new household. However, the situation escalated further when Jenna's parents discovered her relationship with a 20-year-old man named Kenneth, a connection that had roots dating back to Jenna's childhood in Indiana. As Jenna navigated the complexities of her adolescence, one enigmatic figure loomed large in her life: Rhonda, her stepmother. While ostensibly a pillar of support and protection, Rhonda's influence on Jenna's life would ultimately be shrouded in darkness. Delving into Rhonda's story becomes essential to unraveling the mysteries of her personality and understanding the profound impact she had on Jenna's life. Rhonda Rains Oakley, born on March 5, 1964, in Kent, USA, Casey County, emerged into the world as the daughter of Howard Lee Rains and Mabel Walls Rains. Her journey through life saw her graduate from Casey County High School in 1982, embarking on a 3-decade-long career in a renowned company specializing in marketing, packaging, and printing services. Described by her peers as a beacon of kindness and joy, Rhonda's warmth endeared her to many. Prior to her encounter with Philip Oakley, Rhonda had traversed the trials of divorce and motherhood, already a mother of 4 from a previous marriage. Fate intervened when Rhonda and Philip crossed paths on the golf course, igniting a whirlwind romance that led them to tie the knot. Despite their shared affection, the stark age difference between Rhonda and Philip raised eyebrows, prompting familial objections. Concerned about Jenna's involvement with Kenneth, who was 5 years her senior, Philip and Rhonda embarked on a mission to quell their daughter's infatuation. Rules were imposed, including the confiscation of Jenna's electronic devices and stern demands for compliance. However, Jenna's defiance only intensified, her clandestine rendezvous with Kenneth fueling a growing animosity towards her parents. On the fateful afternoon of September 1, 2016, as the golden hues of dusk began to descend, a grim discovery unfolded within the Oakley household. David, Jenna's younger brother, returned home from school, unaware of the tragedy that awaited him. As he stepped through the threshold and into the familiar confines of their home, an eerie silence hung heavy in the air, punctuated only by the distant barking of their family pets echoing from the basement below. Curiosity mingled with apprehension. David ventured into the basement, where the source of the canine distress awaited. What he encountered in that dimly lit space would haunt him forever. There, sprawled upon the cold concrete floor, lay Rhonda, his stepmother, her form unnaturally still, an aura of foreboding enveloping her motionless figure. Shock and panic gripped David's heart as he rushed outside, his frantic footsteps echoing through the quiet suburban streets. With trembling hands, he sought aid from their neighbors, his voice a desperate plea for help in the face of unspeakable horror. Emergency services descended upon the scene, their presence a beacon of hope in the darkness that had descended upon the Oakley household. Yet, despite their valiant efforts, Rhonda's fate had been sealed in bloodshed. The grim reality of her demise painted a chilling picture of brutality, her life extinguished by the cruel hand of violence. As investigators delved into the heart of the matter, the sinister truth began to unfurl like a macabre tapestry. What initially appeared as a botched robbery soon revealed itself to be a tangled web of deceit and betrayal. Amidst the chaos of the crime scene, the absence of Rhonda's car and the ominous discovery of a discarded cleaver hinted at a calculated act of malice, orchestrated with chilling precision. Upon Philip's return home, he was immediately met with the piercing scrutiny of detectives, their questions probing the depths of his shattered reality. With a heavy heart, he recounted the events of that fateful day. Each word a painful reminder of the chaos that had unfolded within the sanctity of their home. As he spoke, a gnawing sense of dread gripped him, tendrils of uncertainty weaving their way into his consciousness. The realization that his daughter, Jenna, had been conspicuously absent from the fabric of their lives on that tragic day only served to deepen the shadow of suspicion that loomed over their fractured existence. In the midst of his interrogation, Philip found himself grappling with the weight of unanswered questions, each more ominous than the last. Did Jenna's inexplicable absence herald a darker truth, a sinister plot veiled beneath layers of deceit? The very thought sent shivers down his spine, a stark reminder of the fragility of their fractured reality. With a heavy heart and trembling voice, Philip disclosed the tumultuous relationship between Jenna and Kenneth, a young man whose presence had cast a pall over their once tranquil home. He recounted his desperate attempts to intervene, to shield his daughter from the perils of forbidden love, each plea falling upon deaf ears. Yet, even amidst the chaos of his shattered existence, Philip clung to the fragile hope that his daughter's innocence remained untainted, that beneath the veneer of suspicion lay a truth yet to be revealed. And so, with bated breath and weary resolve, he entrusted the weight of his fears to the vigilant gaze of law enforcement, their pursuit of justice a beacon of hope amidst the darkness that threatened to consume them all. Evidence pieced together by investigators revealed a chilling sequence of events leading up to the tragic incident. At 3 a.m. on August 31st, the day preceding the harrowing event, Kenneth embarked on a journey from Indiana to Lexington, Kentucky, his destination set firmly on the Oakley residence. Surveillance footage from a Denver store manager corroborated this, capturing Jenna and Kenneth's presence on September 1st. The footage depicted them entering the establishment and subsequently departing, seemingly in the direction of a vehicle resembling Rhonda's stolen car. Jenna's demeanor in the footage was unsettlingly composed, devoid of any outward signs of duress. This revelation prompted investigators to pivot their focus away from the notion of a forcible abduction, instead entertaining the unsettling possibility of Jenna's direct involvement in her stepmother's demise. Subsequent searches of Jenna's personal effects unearthed a chilling narrative within the pages of her diary, a narrative dripping with venomous hatred and a chilling resolve. In its pages, Jenna's innermost thoughts and desires were laid bare, revealing a festering resentment toward her family and a steadfast devotion to Kenneth, despite her earlier assurances of compliance with her parents' wishes. With meticulous detail, Jenna outlined her sinister plan to obliterate her family unit, driven by an obsessive desire to preserve her forbidden love at any cost. Her father was slated as the first victim, the designated hour of his demise meticulously plotted between 4 and 5 a.m. Armed with a knife, Jenna intended to lure him to the basement before delivering the fatal blow. Rhonda, her stepmother, was next in line, her fate sealed within the confines of Jenna's twisted imagination. Between 6 and 8 a.m., Jenna planned to invade Rhonda's sanctuary, silencing her forever with the same instrument of death wielded against her father. David, Jenna's unsuspecting brother, occupied the final slot in her macabre symphony of destruction. In the somber confines of his own room, he would meet his untimely end, victim to the machinations of a sister consumed by darkness. As Philip grappled with the horrifying reality laid bare in Jenna's diary, the weight of his daughter's malevolence bore down upon him, shattering the fragile facade of familial harmony beyond repair. In Jenna's meticulously orchestrated plan, he found himself confronted with the unthinkable. The knowledge that his daughter was capable of unspeakable atrocities, her innocence forever lost to the abyss of her own twisted desires. At the onset of the investigation, a damning piece of evidence emerged, thrusting Jenna into the unforgiving glare of suspicion. Philip wasted no time in providing the authorities with Kenneth's contact details, a crucial step in the relentless pursuit of justice. With unwavering determination, law enforcement agencies swiftly tracked the fugitives to their hideout, culminating in a dramatic showdown on September 4th, just 3 days after the heinous crime had been perpetrated. In the quiet streets of Tucumcari, New Mexico, authorities closed in on their quarry, discovering Rhonda's stolen car parked ominously near the hotel where Jenna and Kenneth sought refuge. With precision and resolve, officers apprehended the pair, swiftly escorting them to separate vehicles, bound for a detention facility in New Mexico pending extradition. As the investigation intensified, authorities scoured the confines of the vehicle in search of the weapon wielded in Rhonda's brutal attack. Yet their efforts yielded nothing but frustration. Meanwhile, Kenneth, in a desperate bid to shield Jenna from the full weight of culpability, penned a chilling missive before attempting to end his own life. The ghastly tableau of his self-inflicted demise sent shockwaves through the detention center, leaving Kenneth teetering on the precipice of mortality. In the wake of this harrowing revelation, authorities made the conscious decision to shield Jenna from the grim reality unfolding within the confines of her co-conspirator's cell. With painstaking care, they orchestrated her return to Kentucky, their intent clear: to spare her the burden of knowledge until such time as she could offer her own testimony. For Jenna, shrouded in the pall of uncertainty, the journey back to her home state would be fraught with trepidation, each passing mile a reminder of the tumultuous path that lay ahead. Jenna's admission to the authorities laid bare the chilling reality of her involvement in the crime, as she recounted the grim sequence of events with a heavy heart. In her confession, she unraveled the haunting narrative of the fateful night, painting a picture of tragic inevitability. According to Jenna's harrowing testimony, The eve of the crime bore witness to Kenneth's clandestine visit to her home, a clandestine rendezvous that would shroud the dawn in darkness and alter the course of countless lives. As the day unfolded, their illicit tryst unfolded against the backdrop of unsuspecting bliss, oblivious to the storm gathering on the horizon. The tranquility of the day was shattered when Rhonda returned home, unwittingly stumbling upon the clandestine affair brewing in the shadows of her own abode. A confrontation ensued, escalating from heated words to the chilling embrace of violence. In a moment of unfathomable rage, Jenna's hands found purchase around Rhonda's throat, a desperate bid for control that would prove futile in the face of her lover's intervention. With a sickening inevitability, Kenneth stepped forward, a dark harbinger of finality as he seized Rhonda in a grip that defied mercy. The room bore witness to the cruel symphony of violence, the echoes of struggle drowned out by the cold steel of a kitchen blade. In the deafening silence that followed, Rhonda lay motionless, her life extinguished by the callous hands of her own kin. In the aftermath of the heinous act, Kenneth's fragile resolve faltered, his stomach lurching in revulsion at the sight of his own depravity. Vomiting into the void, he grappled with the weight of their transgression, a grim testament to the depths of human depravity. When pressed by authorities regarding the whereabouts of the murder weapon, Jenna's response offered little solace, her words a chilling testament to the calculated nature of their flight. With steely resolve, she recounted their hasty disposal of the incriminating evidence, a macabre ritual enacted in the shadow of their impending doom. As Jenna recounted her tale, her lover lingered on the precipice of life and death, his mortal coil tethered to the fleeting tendrils of existence. Yet, fate would not afford him the opportunity to atone for his sins, for the specter of mortality loomed large over his hospital bed. In the cold embrace of October's twilight, Kenneth breathed his last, leaving behind a legacy marred by tragedy and unfulfilled promise. Following the formalities of the court, Jenna found herself facing the weight of justice, her fate entwined with the tendrils of guilt and accusation. The charges levied against her bore testament to the severity of her transgressions, branding her as the architect of her stepmother's demise and a perpetrator of theft. Held without reprieve in the confines of a juvenile detention center, Jenna awaited her trial with a heavy heart, her thoughts haunted by the specter of her own culpability. As the gravity of her situation sank in, her father, once a pillar of familial devotion, turned his back on her, his words a damning indictment of her actions. Gone was the paternal instinct to protect, replaced instead by a grim resolve to see justice served. The news of Kenneth's demise, a grim epilogue to their shared tragedy, was withheld from Jenna until the day of her court hearing. The revelation struck her with the force of a sledgehammer, her world crumbling around her as she grappled with the enormity of her loss. In the hallowed halls of justice, her anguished cries reverberated, a stark reminder of the human cost of her actions. In a bid for clemency, Jenna pleaded guilty to first-degree manslaughter, her admission a frail echo of remorse in the face of overwhelming guilt. Yet, even as she sought redemption, her father's disillusionment loomed large, his cries for systemic reform falling on deaf ears. For Philip, the scars of his family's tragedy ran deep, a testament to the failings of a system ill-equipped to protect its most vulnerable. As the sentencing hearing drew near, Susan Hooper, a beacon of hope amidst the storm of legal proceedings, sought to unravel the tangled web of Jenna's tumultuous upbringing. In her impassioned plea for leniency, she painted a portrait of a girl besieged by a lifetime of abuse and neglect, a victim of circumstance driven to desperate measures by forces beyond her control. As the gavel fell and Jenna's fate was sealed, the echoes of her turbulent past reverberated through the hallowed halls of justice, a haunting reminder of the fragility of the human spirit in the face of insurmountable odds. Despite Jenna's pristine record devoid of any criminal blemish, the perplexing nature of her drastic actions left many scratching their heads in bewilderment. How could a girl so esteemed by her educators and peers stoop to such depths of desperation without a discernible cause? The absence of her family during the trial only added fuel to the fire of speculation, with Philip's refusal to participate and Jenna's mother's conspicuous absence casting a shadow of doubt over their parental obligations. Delving deeper into Jenna's tumultuous past, Susan unearthed a trail of abandonment and neglect that painted a stark picture of maternal indifference. Drawing from a trove of evidence and records, she pieced together the fractured narrative of Jenna's early years, revealing a childhood marred by the absence of maternal guidance and care. Susan's exhaustive investigation traversed state lines, scouring through the annals of child welfare services and medical archives in Indiana and Kentucky alike. Her efforts culminated in a tapestry of testimonies woven together from the threads of Jenna's past acquaintances and confidants. Among them stood Jenna's older half-sister, a reluctant witness whose recollections shed light on the harrowing reality of their shared upbringing. Recounting years of instability and insecurity, she laid bare the truth of their fractured family dynamic, where safety and solace were but distant dreams. As Susan peeled back the layers of Jenna's past, a chilling portrait emerged of a home haunted by the specter of crime and betrayal. Jenna's tender years were marked by the malevolent presence of her mother's ill-fated romance, a dalliance with an ex-convict that plunged their household into a maelstrom of chaos and fear. From the tender age of 3, Jenna bore witness to a procession of theft and infidelity, her innocence shattered by the tumult of her mother's misguided affections. All of these events unfolded before Jenna and her younger brother. It started with a concerned neighbor's call to Child Protective Services upon discovering rats in Jenna's family home. Beyond the rodent issue, the neighbor expressed worry about the children being left unattended for extended periods. Records from social workers' visits painted a grim picture of Jenna's home life. Jenna's mother's hostility toward social workers hindered their access, but when they finally entered, they were met with appalling conditions. Rotten food, piles of garbage, and rat droppings littered the house. Children were found relieving themselves on the floor amidst the squalor. The kitchen was a breeding ground for mold, with unwashed dishes stacked for months. Insects and rodents roamed freely, posing serious health hazards. Compounding the danger, children had unrestricted access to medicines and other harmful substances. Despite efforts to improve the situation by relocating Jenna and her brother to live with their father in Kentucky, conditions did not ameliorate. Hello friends, welcome to my channel. Today, we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Savannah Greywind. On the morning of Saturday, August 19, 2017, Norberta Greywind watched her 22-year-old pregnant daughter Savannah struggle up the stairs to their third-floor apartment. It was a hot day, and Savannah, who was 8 months pregnant, could barely walk on her swollen legs. A few hours later, William Ho, the boyfriend of Brooke Cruz, the same neighbor who had invited Savannah over, entered the apartment. Inside, he found Brooke scrubbing the bathroom. Savannah's bloody body lay on the floor. There was also a basin with a baby in it on top of the toilet lid. When William saw this, Brooke held out the infant to him and said, "This is our baby. This is our family. Please help me." In a move that defied all logic, William helped clean up the blood. He carried bags of bloody towels and clothes out of the apartment. They wrapped bags around Savannah's body, securing them with duct tape and ropes before later disposing of her corpse. Broken families and death marked this tragic event, coinciding with a birth. William Hone told his co-workers that his spouse had given birth to a little girl named Phoenix the day after these events took place. In an ironic twist, the couple who took Savannah's life also named her daughter after a mythological bird known for dying and being reborn. In an interview later on, Brooke's boyfriend described his short days with Heisley Joe, the name given by her family, as beautiful days. He remarked how that baby made him feel like part of a happy little family for just 2 days. Savannah Greywind was born on August 9, 1995 in Burke County, North Dakota. Her father is an ordinary white American, while her mother belongs to the Spirit Lake Sioux Indian tribe. Including herself, she had 2 brothers, Joy and Casey, and a younger sister named Kayla. Norberta and Joe, Savannah's parents, were always very proud of their children. The family resided in Fargo, North Dakota until Savannah turned 9 years old. In 200, they relocated to Spirit Lake Reservation. This place, located in the eastern part of the state, is a Native American Indian area. Savannah had a deep love for nature and animals, particularly horses. It was on the reservation that she met Ashton Mound. The pair first crossed paths when Savannah was 15 years old and remained inseparable ever since. When it became time for college, her family moved back to Fargo. Savannah found employment caring for the elderly at a nursing home while studying to become a nurse. She was preparing to sit for her exam in September. By this period, Savannah was an expectant mother with her first child on the way. She and Ashton secured an apartment by putting down a deposit and planned to move into their new home in early September. For now, she stayed with her parents on the bottom floor of a 7-unit, 3-story apartment building. In this same building, on the 3rd floor, resided Brooke Cruz, 38 years old, and William Hone, 33 years old. It is often said that no one is born evil. Rather, individuals are shaped by their experiences. Brooke Cruz cultivated within herself aspects capable of committing heinous acts of murder as she sought completeness by embracing all facets of her personality, including darker ones beyond her control. Drawn to mysticism since childhood, Brooke found a peculiar allure in crimes perpetrated by serial killers and high-IQ maniacs. As an adult, she professionally delved into criminal psychology to understand their mindset better. Brooke Cruz, the personality, which was characterized by impulsive behavior, anxious avoidance, and irascibility. By the time she reached 38, she was overwhelmed by depression. Physical illness and exhaustion from unhealthy relationships that included regular physical abuse further compounded her troubles. A disturbing fear of losing her partner because she couldn't conceive added to her stress. Brooke couldn't take it anymore. Darkness mingled within her mind. Killing a pregnant woman was seen by her as one way to get the infant she so desperately wanted. After her arrest, Brooke's apartment revealed much about her state of mind. It contained a stack of books on topics ranging from clinical criminal forensic and legal psychology to obstetrics. In a desk drawer were notes listing birthing kit items such as scissors, blades, clamps, and gloves, an infant cardiopulmonary resuscitation bag, and the hormone oxytocin. Brooklyn Cruz grew up in Florida's Bradenton, Sarasota neighborhood. Her parents divorced, leaving 7 children, including Brooke, to live with their mother. Recollections from one sister described their family life as quite good. However, diary entries kept by Brooke throughout later life painted a different picture, depicting a difficult childhood she struggled to forget. As she aged out of adolescence, Brooke's once caring and open-minded demeanor changed significantly. She became testy, but not aggressive, a troubled teenager among siblings who chose to stay with their father instead of their mother, who referred to him as a professional criminal. Life with her father didn't pan out well either. She subsequently found herself moving in and out of foster homes. From that point onward, the siblings lost touch with Brooke. They only learned that Brooke is the mother of at least 7 children through news coverage related to a shocking crime. At the age of 15, Brooke met Aaron Edwards. In 1995, when she was about 17, she gave birth to a child in County, Florida. She left the infant with the father and moved away. A court ordered her to pay child support, but Brooke did not honor the court order. She remembered her daughter when she turned 14. Their communication was limited to a few Facebook messages in the evenings. Brooke worked as a waitress at the Chinese Dragon restaurant and as a sales representative and animal specialist at Petland Pet Store in Bradenton, Florida. In early 2002, at age 23, Brooke was jailed in Missouri for falsifying documents but was released on parole on August 31, 2002. However, she was arrested again and sent to jail in Hidalgo County, Texas, for a parole violation. In 2006, at age 27, Brooke married Carl Cruz, a carpenter from Minnesota. During their marriage, she gave birth to 2 children and worked as an administrative assistant in her husband's carpentry shop. Unfortunately, the marriage lasted only 3 years due to infidelity on her part. They divorced in June 2009. According to documents, custody of the children went to Carl. Brooke then moved to California without explanation. Throughout her life, one consistent activity for Brooke was keeping diaries and recording events meticulously. After a tragic event, these entries became public. The diaries revealed numerous romantic relationships marked by initial enthusiasm, heart-shaped marks around the edges. She returned to her now ex-husband's house after a trip to California. She registered on a dating site and began to study psychology in earnest. On the dating site tagged, the young woman met Andrew Murray, a chef from Katoomba, New South Wales, Australia. She decided to move to Australia in late 2011. In January 2012, an argument erupted over a child custody issue. During this conflict, Brooke grabbed a knife and attacked her ex-husband. Police arrested her and filed criminal charges. Brooke denied the knife attack, but chose not to wait for a court hearing. Instead, she fled to Australia using false immigration papers and married Andrew. This Australian marriage lasted exactly 6 months. Andrew discovered her American past, including her husband, children, and fake immigration papers. After uncovering these truths, his wife, according to Andrew, began threatening him with arrest for aiding and abetting. This led Andrew to go to the police himself and disclose everything just in case. Andrew recalled their marriage as being filled with conversations about maniacs. He later revealed that as early as 2012, Brooke was already obsessed with crime. She studied psychology and nursing and did her thesis on serial killers. From her words, she was always reading books about maniacs and crime and could tell you anything about them. Andrew observed that over time, Brooke became increasingly aggressive. It took 6 months and 10 days from her arrival until she returned to the US in October 2012. On September 22, 2012, Brooke made a diary entry noting that she had changed significantly for the better after returning from Australia. She engaged in a lengthy custody battle for her 2 children. She might have had a chance for a new life if she reconciled with Andrew Murray, but instead met William Hone in late 2012. William Hone had been convicted of child abuse months earlier after bringing his son to the hospital with a fractured skull near his right ear in January 2011. Brooke fell in love with this man who was twice divorced, had 2 kids, didn't pay child support, had anger issues, and was under a court order for no contact with his children. Brooke was full of energy and desire for change, aiming to be her new self, take care of the kids, and move forward positively, and found herself employment. In 2013, Brooke transformed a hobby into a profession by enrolling at Minnesota State University in Moorhead. There, she took courses like social behavior, physiological psychology, cognitive theory, psychology of deviant behavior, and directed research. She had a keen interest in the psychology of serial killers. Initially, her relationship with William was wonderful. However, over time, the relationship turned codependent with joint use of alcohol and illegal substances. Brooke believed she was controlling well, but felt progressively worse. She began avoiding her children, changed jobs due to conflicts with staff, and became more engrossed in her psychological research into humanity's darker sides. On December 23, 2014, she lost her custody battle. Judge Waldemar of the Otter Tail County Courthouse granted temporary sole physical and legal custody of the children to their father, Carl. That same day, Brooke suffered a panic attack and was taken to the hospital emergency room with a diagnosis of post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, according to medical records. Years later, during her trial for murder, she would state that the events in 2014 marked a turning point in her life when she lost the ability to control her impulses and evaluate her actions clearly, though she did not specify what those events were. In January 2015, an entry appeared in her diary stating, "I feel like I started this relationship with a purse full of love coins, and slowly but surely, this purse is empty, and I just have nothing to give." She expressed that their intimacy wasn't the same as before. "About once a week he makes time for me. The intimacy lasts about 7 to 15 minutes. He doesn't care at all about my satisfaction." Brooke complained of his inattentiveness and became increasingly withdrawn. 5 months later, she was diagnosed with gallbladder disease. Physical and psychological deterioration set in. Brooke practically stopped leaving the house. In May 2016, police responded to a call. William Hahn had brutally beaten his girlfriend in the bathroom. He pleaded guilty to assault and was banned from approaching Brooke. 6 months later, police came again on a neighbor's call and found Hahn in Brooke's apartment. He pleaded guilty to violating the restraining order. They backed together after this, but a healthy moment never returned to their relationship. Brooke was unable to have children after an abortion in 2011. William, however, constantly demanded a child from her. In early 2017, after another fight, Brooke lied to Hahn about being pregnant to prevent him from leaving. She even emailed him a fake ultrasound picture and a photo of a positive pregnancy test. She found a recording of some random baby's heartbeat online and showed it to her partner, claiming it was their future child's heartbeat. By August 2017, they had another big fight. It became obvious there was no pregnancy. Since William had already told everyone about his future paternity and did not want to appear foolish, he literally demanded a child from his girlfriend. He mentioned the pregnant neighbor living 3 floors below them. Brooke Cruz later told police officers that she took William's demand as an ultimatum and believed he desired to take the baby away from Savannah, though this wasn't directly stated by him. Brooke had medical knowledge and began compiling a list of what she needed to induce labor. She anticipated and did whatever her young lover wanted her to do. On a Saturday afternoon in August, Brooke knocked on the door of a downstairs apartment and offered Savannah $20 for serving as a model for a dress Brooke was supposedly sewing. Savannah accepted before going upstairs to her neighbor's apartment. Before heading up, Savannah ordered pizza, expecting to have some when she got home later on that day. An hour later, with the plan to drive her younger brother to work, Savannah's mother did not return on time. Her brother decided to go upstairs by himself around 2:30 in the afternoon. He heard the hum of a sewing machine, but received no response at the door. A few minutes later, Savannah's father, Joe, also went upstairs and knocked. Brooke responded that they were still working on the dress and Savannah was trying it on, hence why no one could open the door. Meanwhile, Norberta drove her son to work herself. Upon returning home, she found an untouched pizza. Concerned, she texted her daughter several times. Getting no reply, she went upstairs. A neighbor mentioned that Savannah had left soon after completing their fitting. Worried, Norberta went back to her apartment and observed all of Savannah's personal items. Shoes, purse, car keys were still there. Given Savannah's condition and discomfort caused by heat and swelling, it was unlikely she had gone for a walk. Norberta called Ashton to check if he had picked up their daughter. To her dismay, Ashton said Savannah wasn't responding to him either. Increasingly anxious, Norberta contacted the police and drove around looking for her pregnant daughter, who might have taken ill suddenly. While driving around, Norberta theorized that if Savannah had gone somewhere nearby, she would have seen signs of her. However, an uneasy feeling suggested otherwise. Later that day, police searched Brooke and William's apartment since it was Savannah's last known location. The landlord allowed entry and cooperated fully. However, without a warrant, police did not search more thoroughly into closets or behind closed doors. The police informed the family that since Savannah was an adult capable of making her own decisions without informing them, and because there was no apparent crime evidence at or near home, the initial investigation concluded that she had left voluntarily. Savannah's family perceived this approach as indifferent and found it deeply upsetting. Police returned 2 more times for subsequent searches, but were unsuccessful in finding any additional information or clues regarding Savannah's whereabouts. William Hahn later testified during one of these searches as part of the ongoing investigation process. On August 23, 2017, William's colleagues informed law enforcement that he had boasted about having an infant at home. That same day, residents of the apartment complex reported hearing a baby crying from apartment number 5 and immediately alerted the police. This information enabled officers to secure a warrant and return to the familiar apartment for a comprehensive search. During this search, a newborn baby girl was found alive. Brooke divulged that Savannah herself had given her the baby 2 days after her disappearance. According to Brooke, Savannah did not want to keep the baby and had come over originally to assist with sewing a dress. On that day, she inquired how she could induce labor herself. She then left only to reappear 2 days later at 3 a.m. with the baby in her arms and handed her to Brooke. The couple was subsequently arrested, and Savannah was officially reported missing. The infant was taken to a local hospital and placed in temporary custody of Cass County Social Services. A few days later, DNA testing confirmed parentage, and she was reunited with her father. For 3 additional days, police and numerous local residents scoured the valley in search of Savannah. Chief Todd urged property owners and landlords to inspect their properties, buildings, garages, outbuildings, and vacant apartments for any signs of intrusion or other indications that someone might have been there. On August 27th, 8 days after Savannah's disappearance, a fisherman discovered a body wrapped in plastic along the Red River near Harwood. The body was identified as Savannah through a distinctive tattoo on her leg that read, "Too beautiful for Earth." On August 28th, Brooke Cruz and William Hone were formally charged with conspiracy to commit murder, conspiracy to kidnap, and providing false information to police authorities. The couple began to talk. Brooke stated she initiated the altercation by accusing pregnant Savannah of stealing mail and mistreating her cat. The verbal argument escalated into a physical confrontation. Brooke pushed Savannah, causing her to fall and hit her head on bathroom sink, leading to loss of consciousness. Brooke then used a knife to perform an incision from hip to hip and removed the baby. Savannah drifted in and out of consciousness during this procedure. Under questioning, Brooke confirmed that William Hahn was unaware of the impending plan. According to her, when William arrived home, he entered the bathroom, saw Savannah, and inquired if she was alive. Brooke responded that she did not know and sought assistance. William briefly left the bathroom and returned holding a rope with which he strangled Savannah. Next, Brooke said they cleaned the floor and walls, then placed Savannah's body into a bathroom closet. When law enforcement arrived at their door, Brooke attempted to remain composed. The officers conducted a superficial search of the apartment without a warrant. Therefore, they couldn't inspect closets or dressers thoroughly. During these searches, according to the perpetrator, the infant was concealed under a blanket on their bed next to William. The child remained very calm and did not cry, thus avoiding detection at that time. By August 20th's third inspection, Savannah's body had already been moved into a dresser while the infant was hidden in a suitcase. In the early hours of August 21st, they transported the dresser downstairs and loaded it into their Jeep Cherokee to dispose of it by the river. William Hahn denied participating in the crime itself, but admitted only to hiding the newborn baby girl and providing false information to law enforcement in an attempt to cover up related activities. Both Brooke and William were assigned bail set at $2 million each, an amount William described as unrealistic and unreasonable for any ordinary individual. Brooke Cruz a life sentence in prison without the possibility of parole. William's involvement in the crime wasn't proven during the trial. Additionally, it came to light that Brooke's cellmate, Jennifer Robinson, testified against her. According to Jennifer, Brooke disclosed that she strangled Savannah with a rope because she discovered Savannah's affair with William and suspected that Savannah's child might have been his. On September 28, 2018, a jury acquitted William of conspiracy to commit murder. However, on October 30, 2018, after pleading guilty to kidnapping, he received a life sentence in prison. The following spring, in May 2019, William appealed to the Supreme Court. By October 7, 2019, at the sentencing review trial, Judge Olin, who initially sentenced William, indicated that despite the Supreme Court's dissent, he would still impose the harshest possible sentence at that time, 20 years in prison. Considering William had already spent 775 days behind bars by then, he must serve over 7 more years of his 20-year sentence. Baby Hazel remained unharmed despite such an unnatural delivery and is now 6 years old and attending kindergarten. Savannah's parents and the girl's father share joint custody. The grandparents manage a public Facebook page where they post updates about their granddaughter's well-being and activities. The case has gained significant attention, with Norberta being adamant that her daughter's disappearance wasn't taken seriously because Savannah was Native American. She commented on how different it would have been if a white woman had disappeared. "I've lived in Fargo almost my whole life and seen how differently Native Americans are treated." Following Savannah's death, Democratic Senator Heidi Heitkamp introduced Savannah's Law, which was signed into law in October 2020. This law aims to combat violence against Native American women by enhancing collaboration between federal, state, and tribal authorities. Norberta remarked on the law's passage, "It's sad that my daughter had to die for people to take Native Americans seriously." Hello friends, welcome to Out Channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Caitlin Poirier. On January 12, 2023, CBS News Minnesota broadcasted a 24-second clip regarding the passing of Donald Blum, an elderly man with gray hair. He died on January 10, 2023, at the age of 73 due to natural causes associated with aging. Who exactly was this person who became the subject of the news report? Donald Blum was a well-known figure, known for his violent and criminal activities. He was sentenced to life in prison, and despite his crimes, he met a natural end. Blum's death marks the end of a long tale of violence and wickedness that initiated back in the 1970s. His string of crimes culminated in the brutal killing of Kathy Poirier. Despite his history of violence, Blum managed to escape justice for many years until a chance encounter resulted in his arrest and subsequent punishment. His criminal activities commenced in 1975 when he abducted a young girl, assaulting her and locking her in his car trunk. The girl, however, managed to escape and inform the authorities. Blum was eventually convicted, yet his punishment was considered lenient. By 1978, after gaining his freedom, he committed aggravated assault once more. In 1983, he faced charges of criminal sexual conduct yet again. He also terrorized 2 young girls in a secluded area with a knife, binding them to a tree, gagging them, and choking one repeatedly before stopping each time, continuing to make threats. The girls were rescued when a passing police patrol noticed their car parked incorrectly and swiftly investigated. Blum escaped into the woods and changed his appearance by dyeing his hair. However, his efforts were in vain, as he was apprehended 2 months later when one of the girls identified him. Blum admitted to committing the crime, but the punishment he received did not succeed in rehabilitating him. In 1992, a psychologist predicted that without close supervision, Blum would return to behaving in an antisocial manner, which was later confirmed by his actions. Despite changing his name, finding employment, and getting married, Blum accumulated 6 felony convictions by May 1999, mostly involving kidnappings and violence. To understand the origin of this cruelty and desire to control others in an average individual like Donald Blum, we must explore his troubled upbringing. Donald Alban Blum was born on February 5, 1949, in Minnesota and held American citizenship. His childhood was marked by abuse from his father that persisted from a young age into his teenage years. Early signs of heavy drinking and behavioral problems emerged during his school years, with school attendance becoming irregular when he reached 10th grade. The trauma from his tumultuous relationship with his father likely contributed to his behavioral issues and alcohol abuse, especially during adolescence. Examining the story from a mentally healthy perspective allows us to trace how the series of events may have led to Donald's actions. On May 26, 1999, Caitlin Poirier disappeared while working alone during the night shift at a convenience store linked to a service station. Surveillance footage showed a large man dressed in jeans, a backwards baseball cap, and a New York Yankees jersey with the number 23, taking Caitlin out of the store around 11:40 p.m. Catherine Harnick, who works at a Subway restaurant near the convenience store where Caitlin went missing, was interviewed by the police. She mentioned seeing a man behaving strangely just before their store closed at around 10 p.m. Later, as she was driving home, she coincidentally saw the same man leaving the convenience store. This series of events highlights how critical moments can eventually lead to actions influenced by deep-rooted trauma and unresolved issues. Harnick noted that the unknown man was driving a black Ford F-150 pickup truck with a cab and white markings on the side. The truck circled the maintenance area several times before heading towards Moose Lake and stopping in the parking lot of a local cafe. She also observed that Kathy's car was still in the parking lot when she left work. Based on her description and partially recovered surveillance camera footage, a rough sketch of the suspected kidnapper was created. The individual was described as having long blonde hair and appearing to be around 25 years old. A composite sketch, based on information from 4 witnesses, was shared on local TV and in newspapers to gather more information. Hundreds of people from across the state joined in the search for Kathy Poirier in the wooded area near the station. Despite efforts with service dogs and helicopters, no trace of her was found. Posters of Kathy were circulated in newspapers and on billboards across the region, turning her disappearance into a high-profile case. The nearby sex offender facility confirmed that all inmates were present, ruling out the possibility of a kidnapping by an escaped offender. Police started searching for the vehicle using its license plate number and identified Donald Blum as a potential suspect. However, the truck in his driveway was white. The official search for Kathy ended on June 6, 1999, without success. However, many volunteers continued their efforts, hoping to find her. Investigators believed that someone might have seen something that could help make a connection and bring her home. They noted that the person who kidnapped Kathy might have made a mistake by taking her from a store with security cameras. Searchers focused on the neighborhood itself because if the perpetrator was familiar enough to return to the area twice at night, then someone might have seen him before. A search headquarters was set up at the Lutheran Church in Moose Lake, where staff members processed leads and volunteers distributed flyers about Kathy. Despite extensive efforts and optimism from many involved in finding her, Kathy was never found. Speculation arose that the kidnapper could be an athlete or a New York Yankees fan, so police sought help from sports figures. After 2 weeks with no results, the police asked Minnesota Twins legend Paul Molitor to make a public service announcement. His appeal caught the attention of Daryl Brown, who worked at the Minnesota Veterans Home. On June 18th, Brown called the hotline to report his co-worker Donald Hutchinson, who had similarities to a composite sketch and had recently changed his appearance. Investigation revealed that Donald Hutchinson was actually Donald Blum. He had a black pickup truck hidden in his garage and owned property near the store where Kathy worked. Further digging showed that Blum had previously been convicted of sex crimes, including kidnapping young girls like Kathy. Investigators quickly obtained a search warrant, and agents from the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension located Blum and his family at a campground 140 miles away from Richfield. They woke him up early in the morning to question him. Blum was taken in for further questioning, where it was discovered that he had bought property in Moose Lake around 2 years ago. Neighbors confirmed his frequent visits before Katie's disappearance, mentioning he had not been seen there since. Blum's supervisor at the Veterans Home claimed to be unaware of Blum's criminal history as he went by the name Hutchinson. The supervisor noted that Blum was reserved and not very sociable. Following his arrest, Donald Blum initially cooperated but later chose not to testify and requested legal representation. Authorities led searches which led to the seizure of various items from Blum's residence, although there was no official statement regarding these items and their relevance to the case. An extensive search was conducted on Blom's 20-acre Moose Lake property, involving over 100 National Guard members and hundreds of volunteers who ventured deep into the woods from his land. Though they had to stop as night fell, they resumed their efforts the following morning. Vigor and Katie's mother expressed optimism about finding her daughter, some believing she might be held against her will. However, the sheriff was less hopeful. On the second day of the search, investigators found bone-like fragments among ashes in a fire pit on Donald Blom's property. These fragments were sent for further testing, confirming their origin as bone fragments. A tooth found in the ashes was sent to odontologists for examination. Dr. Norlander, a certified forensic dentist, performed a thorough examination of the tooth, knowing that DNA from the pulp would likely be destroyed. While examining, she found something that looked like a filling, which confirmed it was a human tooth. This helped her determine if it could have belonged to Katie. Dental fillings are made up of an organic matrix and an inorganic filler. The organic part burns away, but the filler particles remain. Analysts can then identify a specific brand or at least a group of potential brands, since manufacturers use up to 50 different types of fillers, each of which shows up distinctly on dental X-rays. The composition of the filling from Blom's fire pit matched the one used for Katie's teeth. Furthermore, researchers were able to identify it as tooth 18 and deduced that it belonged to a young woman. The likelihood that it was Katie's tooth and not someone else's from the area was very high. One major question remains unanswered. Why was the perpetrator released from prison after kidnapping 7 different girls? If the justice system had functioned properly, Katie might still be alive. Instead, Blom managed to change his name, escape his criminal history, find a job, get married, and assume a new identity, all of which allowed him to continue causing harm. In Katie Poirier's case, Blom was accused of kidnapping and illegal possession of a firearm, a federal offense due to his prior convictions that prohibited him from carrying firearms. He initially declined a plea deal, but later changed his mind, agreeing to testify under certain conditions that allowed him to call his family. On September 8th, Blom made a tearful confession that lasted 2.5 hours. He confessed that on May 26, 1999, he went fishing and then drove back to his home in Richfield later that evening. However, he returned to his home on Moose Lake afterward. On the way, he stopped to buy alcohol and have a drink at a bar. He saw Kathy in the store while she was working. Even though he didn't know her, he grabbed her, forced her into his pickup truck, and took her to his motorhome. Blom explained that he was unsure whether his actions stemmed from guilt, feeling foolish, or another reason, but he eventually strangled and killed her. He strangled her from behind, taking approximately 20 minutes. He denied any other form of assault. After realizing she was deceased, Blom placed her in a fire pit in a fetal position, gathering wood and paper to ignite the fire. Blom's version of events contradicted video footage and evidence found at the burn pit. He claimed Kathy had asked multiple times to be released, although she did not resist until he began choking her on his property. He maintained that he was able to end her life using only his hands. Blom's description of burning the body seemed implausible, as wood and paper alone couldn't generate enough heat to reduce a human body to ashes. When pressed, he admitted that none of it made sense to him. He couldn't explain why he did it. At the end of the interview, Blom contacted 2 local TV stations to confess his actions and requested that his family be left alone by the media. As part of the agreement, confiscated property was returned to his wife Amy Blom, including land on Moose Lake, a residence in Richfield, and the family vehicle. For the Poirier family, the confession was devastating, as they had hoped Kathy was still alive. Blom now asserted that she had been murdered and cremated without any discernible motive apart from an inexplicable nighttime impulse. Shortly after, Blom retracted his confession, attributing it to stress from solitary confinement and medication-induced hallucinations that led him to believe confessing was his only escape from his cell. Consequently, the plea deal was revoked as both sides' legal teams prepared for trial. False confessions manifest in various ways. Sometimes, individuals confess to crimes they didn't commit spontaneously. This can occur in response to high-profile cases. Some people succumb to intense interrogation pressure and confess quickly. Additionally, there's a phenomenon where individuals internalize police accusations and come to believe they were involved in crimes they didn't commit. Blom may have admitted to lying under oath or taken back his statement, leaving the decision to the jury. The trial of Blom commenced in June 2000 and involved an extensive jury selection process lasting 5 weeks, followed by 5 weeks of trial proceedings. More than 50 witnesses, including key individuals, were summoned to testify. The case was presented by Thomas Perler, the assistant prosecuting attorney of Carleton County. Initially, Blom's brother testified that he had given their family a box of old clothing, which included a New York Yankees jersey. This revelation was crucial as Blom had previously denied owning such a garment. Testimonies from 2 women who were kidnapped by Blom in 1983 were particularly damning. They shared their experiences at his hands, shedding light on his behavior towards them when they were young girls, similar to Kathy. Forensic dentists later confirmed that a particular tooth found matched Kathy based on age, gender, and dental records. Expert witness Dr. Ann Norlander initially had doubts about the tooth's identity, but eventually testified with reasonable medical certainty that it belonged to Kathy, based on specific chemicals in the filling material. Additional proof came from surveillance footage from a different store captured in May, showing Blom around the time of Kathy's abduction. His hair, originally gray with blonde tips, verified by his barber, gave him a more youthful look. A pivotal moment in the trial was when Blom's confession was presented in court, with each juror receiving a transcript for examination. The courtroom was filled with the quiet sobs of Kathy's relatives, indicating the strong case against Blom. On August 7th, the lead defense attorney, Rodney Broden, introduced his first witness, Amy Blom, who claimed that her husband was home on the night of Kathy's disappearance. She mentioned recalling seeing a news broadcast the following day about the girl's vanishing act. Amy brought attention to the fact that Katie's disappearance happened near their country house on Moose Lake, which is 110 miles away from their home. Amy considered Blom a suspect due to his criminal record. However, she later recalled his whereabouts on the night prior. Blom had returned home at 9:30 p.m., and by the morning, Amy found coffee ready and saw his spouse at home while they were in bed. Amy mentioned how she felt bullied by the police officers who threatened to take her children if she did not comply with their questioning. She expressed frustration at being called a liar. Moreover, Amy denied ever receiving a baseball jersey from her son-in-law and claimed to have never seen her husband wearing one. During her testimony, Blom was visibly emotional, wiping his eyes in distress. On August 10th, he took the stand to defend himself under oath, denying accusations of kidnapping Kathy Poirier. He spent over 3 hours on the stand, alternating between speaking and crying. Blom portrayed himself as a man in turmoil, claiming his life was in shambles and he was unwell during that period. While he initially confessed to the crime to investigators, Blom later stated that he recanted the confession. He insisted that on the night of the crime, he was at home with his wife, as she had told him, despite being at Moose Lake for fishing earlier in the day. Blom arrived home at 10 p.m. that evening, before Katie was taken. During cross-examination, he had to acknowledge the lies and inconsistencies in his initial statements to the police at the start of the investigation. His courtroom appearance did not sway opinions in his favor, as many perceived him as trying to evade responsibility by portraying himself as a victim. After the questioning ended, Blom seemed frustrated. He turned to the judge, cursed, and asked if he could make one final statement. When the judge denied his request, the case was handed over to the jury. They deliberated for 10 hours, spending 3 hours replaying taped confessions. Ultimately, the jury found Donald Blom guilty, sentencing him to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Blom maintained his innocence, declaring, "I never killed anyone." he was confident that he had a strong case for appeal. Despite his belief, in 2004, the appeals court upheld his conviction in an 81-page ruling. While acknowledging that his trial was not perfect, the court deemed it fair and saw no reason to overturn the verdict or order a new trial. The murder of Catelyn Poirier resulted in the enactment of Katie's Law. This legislation involved the creation of a statewide computerized crime-fighting network and stricter regulations for monitoring predatory sex offenders like Blom. Welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Lauren Heike. Life can be unpredictable, filled with both joyous moments and heart-wrenching tragedies. The story of Lauren Heike, 29-year-old from Phoenix, Arizona, serves as a poignant reminder of how fragile our existence can be and how quickly everything can change. Lauren, a beautiful soul with captivating green eyes, had an unwavering faith in the goodness of others. Little did she know that her trust and openness would ultimately lead to her untimely demise. Lauren Heike was born on November 20, 1993, in Seattle, Washington, into a well-off family. Her father, Jeff, owned a plumbing manufacturing business, and her mother, Lana, worked in real estate. She was very close to her older brother, Ryan. Lauren received her secondary education at Central Kitsap High School in Silverdale, Washington. After graduation, she moved to Phoenix and enrolled at the Gary Manuel Leda Institute, where she studied to become a cosmetologist and skincare specialist. Lauren always took great care of herself and had a good understanding of cosmetics, so her education helped her develop her natural inclinations. She began her career at the age of 18 and built a successful path. Initially, she worked as a customer support representative for 5 years, starting in 2015. Lauren then became a leading manager at the renowned cosmetics company Benefit before working as a cosmetologist at a beauty salon for 9 months in October 2020. She later got a job as a manager at the Center for Aesthetic Medicine. She also planned to follow in her mother's footsteps and try her hand in the real estate field. At the time of the tragedy, Lauren was working full-time as an instructor at a golf club. She was never afraid of difficulties, was responsible, and easily found common ground with people. She was actively developing in the beauty industry, sports, and real estate. Lauren carefully monitored her physical fitness, regularly engaging in fitness activities, and generally led a healthy, active lifestyle. She had many friends and a supportive family. In addition to working in sports and meeting with friends, she adored traveling and hiking. It was because of the presence of picturesque trails that she loved Phoenix so much. Lauren often walked alone, listening to music and enjoying the fresh air, silence, and tranquility of nature. Her favorite route was a path in the northern part of the city, not far from her apartment, where there was almost never anyone around. Understandably, her parents were very concerned about her solitary walks in deserted places, but Lauren herself was convinced that nothing bad could happen to her. According to her family, Lauren had a kind of routine. She would wake up, drink coffee, chat with loved ones and friends, and then go for a walk. She did this every day because she believed that this way she would start the new day with positivity. Unfortunately, she did not realize that her trusting nature and carefree attitude could cause a fatal role. On April 28, 2023, Lauren's morning began as usual. She drank coffee, talked with family and friends on the phone, and went for her usual walk in the northern district of Phoenix, not far from her own apartment. The route passed through a picturesque trail in a calm, quiet, sparsely populated area, and took 15 to 30 minutes one way. The girl left the house at approximately 10:30 a.m. The last time surveillance cameras recorded her was at 10:52, when Lauren was calmly walking along the trail in the park. She was wearing a pink sports top, black leggings, and sneakers. She only had her phone and keys with her. No one saw her again. Lauren was supposed to show up for work at 11:30, but did not come and did not warn about her delay or absence. This was uncharacteristic for a very responsible girl. Colleagues started calling her, but to no avail. Lauren's phone was turned off. Worried friends began sending messages on social networks and calling each other, hoping that someone knew where Lauren was. But no one could say anything because no one had seen her after she left the house in the morning. Around 1 p.m., Lauren's parents, unable to reach her, arrived at her apartment hoping their daughter was unwell and had not gone to work. However, Lauren was not home, though her belongings were undisturbed and the doors locked. No signs of a break-in or struggle were evident. It appeared she had gone for a walk and not returned. Concerned, her family promptly contacted the police to report her missing. Law enforcement responded swiftly, but initial searches proved futile. The sunny day of April 28th, typical for the area, saw few visitors at the park where Lauren was last seen walking. Had someone been present during the attack, perhaps the tragedy could have been averted, but fate dictated otherwise. As hours passed with no word from Lauren, anxiety mounted among her loved ones. Despite extensive searches of the park and surrounding areas, no clues surfaced. Hoping she had simply wandered off or was delayed, family and friends reached out in vain. The next morning, April 29th, around 11 a.m., the worst fears were realized when a passerby discovered Lauren's body. The woman promptly contacted the authorities, who found Lauren's body, riddled with stab wounds, a short distance from the trail in the undergrowth. She lay face up, arms outstretched, clothes torn, blood everywhere. Forensic experts quickly began their investigation. The medical examiner later determined her death on April 28th around 11 a.m. was due to severe blood loss from 15 deep knife wounds, likely inflicted with a pocket knife. The fatal wound to her back suggested a prolonged attack, evidenced by wounds of varying depth and location on her body. Injuries on her hands indicated a struggle, with deep cuts on both sides as she tried to defend herself from the sharp knife. Despite her resistance, the assailant, aggressive and strong, overpowered her unexpectedly. Scratches on her back and torn clothing suggested a surprise attack from behind, knocking her down and repeatedly stabbing her. A footprint from a size 42 to 43 sneaker at the scene likely belonged to the attacker. Signs of an attempt to escape, crawl away, and hide were visible in the area, but unsuccessful. Traces of blood and remains of a struggle near a barbed wire fence showed her desperate efforts to evade the murderer. Her personal belongings, a phone, and house keys were found nearby. There were no wallet or other valuables on her, so the possibility of robbery was immediately dismissed. Lauren's phone was found to be broken. The last calls were made on the evening of April 27th. As no one had heard from her for over a day, forensic specialists conducted a thorough examination of the territory. They discovered an important detail a few meters from the crime scene. Among the branches lay a bloody pocket knife. Experts immediately suspected this to be the murder weapon. A detailed examination of the blade and handle revealed fingerprints and other DNA traces belonging to an unknown man. Hair and epithelium of the killer were also found at the crime scene. Lauren's body and all physical evidence were promptly sent for examination. Simultaneously, investigators reviewed surveillance camera footage. It was revealed that one of the cameras captured the moment Lauren entered the park at 10:52. She was walking alone, listening to music on her headphones. Nothing suspicious was noted. However, a minute later, the figure of a tall, thin man in dark clothes sprinted past the camera, trying to hide his face. Despite this, experts identified him as a young African-American man in a cap, matching the description of the individual found at the crime scene. Another camera positioned at the park's exit recorded the same man swiftly exiting around the corner at 10:59. He attempted to climb over the fence, but got snagged on his clothes, eventually jumping over and losing his cap. The suspect then disappeared in an unknown direction. These recordings provided the investigation with a crucial lead, offering a detailed description of the person to be located. It's notable that the unknown man's appearance in the park coincided with the time of Lauren's murder. The cameras captured the suspect immediately before and after the crime. A meticulous analysis of the footage showed that the suspect moved purposefully and quickly, appearing vigilant as if afraid of being detected. Secondly, he showed up in the park only 30 to 40 seconds after Lauren, clearly following her. Following the crime, he quickly ran away in the opposite direction from the park's entrance, climbing a fence to disappear rapidly. All of this supports the belief that the murder was planned in advance, indicating it may not have been his first crime. He acted swiftly and boldly, attempting to leave no trace. However, in the panic of the escape, he made some errors that led to him being captured partially on camera. The footage from the cameras was promptly shared with Lauren's relatives, but no one could identify him in the video. The shock and sorrow felt by everyone was palpable. Her relatives couldn't comprehend how someone could brutally take the life of their beloved, gentle girl. Lauren had no enemies, conflicts, valuables, or significant sums of money. Her lifestyle was not hazardous, dispelling notions of revenge or robbery. 1 week after the tragic event, the police held a press conference to share details about the evidence found. They asked the public for help in identifying the suspect. Lauren's father, with tears in his eyes, urged anyone with information to come forward. The family also offered a significant reward for any useful leads. The city was worby Lauren's story, sparking a huge reaction. Social media was full of sharing information, search efforts, and volunteer work. At the same time, forensic investigations continued. DNA, fingerprints, and other biological evidence were carefully examined in the lab. Finally, experts struck gold. The suspect's genetic profile matched records in the police database. The system revealed the name, Zion William Teasley, a 22-year-old African-American with a history of criminality. Detectives swiftly delved into Zion's background, unearthing his challenging upbringing in a home marred by addiction and criminality since his youth. In 2020, he was convicted of a series of armed robberies. Zion spent almost a year in prison but was released early for good behavior. He was last arrested in January 2023 for a knife attack on a passerby. However, the victim then withdrew the statement, so Teasley got off with a suspended sentence. At the time of Lauren's murder, he was under police supervision and had to regularly check in at the precinct. The last such check took place on April 27th, the day before the tragedy in the park. With this new information, the detectives began to develop a plan to detain the suspect. They established round-the-clock surveillance on him and discovered that Zion was not working anywhere at that time, spending all his time at home and occasionally visiting some dubious individuals. Obtaining an arrest warrant, the capture group went to Zion Teasley's apartment. The door had to be broken down, but no one was inside. During the search, the police found a bucket of chlorine, gloves, and rags, indicating an attempt to destroy evidence, though he didn't have enough time for it. In Zion's room, they found a suitcase stuffed with clothes, a brand new passport in a different name, and bus tickets to Canada, suggesting a plan to flee the country. Investigators immediately suspected that Zion had found out about the search and was trying to evade justice. A large-scale special operation began with the focus on Zion Teasley being sent to all states. Border guards were alerted to apprehend the murder suspect. Patrols were deployed at railway stations, airports, and highways. Detectives traced the fugitive's phone calls and located him using signals from cell towers. Meanwhile, they also collected evidence, including witnesses who saw Zion Teasley following Lauren before her murder. A thorough investigation into Zion's history uncovered previous assaults on women, suggesting a history of violence. He was arrested for harassing a girl in a club. Prior to that, a girl he was dating wrote a statement accusing him of beating her. Although the case was closed due to lack of evidence, Zion was widely regarded as an extremely aggressive and unbalanced person who held contempt for women, considering them inferior. His social media posts were filled with derogatory language towards women, and there were also photos of knives resembling the murder weapon. Police suggested that Lauren might have been a random victim of Zion's violent tendencies. It was theorized that he spotted her on the street, stalked her, and then attacked her in a deserted place. Some speculated that he may have felt provoked by her attractiveness and apparent vulnerability, a common trigger for individuals with his mindset. Lauren's family, devastated by her senseless death, implored the public to eschew vigilante justice and allow the legal system to handle the case. After a 3-day search, Zion Teasley was apprehended in an abandoned garage on the city's outskirts. During his arrest, he resisted and injured a police officer. Subsequently, during questioning, he adamantly denied any involvement in the crime. However, when presented with surveillance footage from the park, he fell silent and requested legal representation. The prosecution swiftly charged Zion Teasley with intentional murder and kidnapping, citing substantial evidence such as video recordings, Lauren's belongings found in the garage, a knife, and DNA and fingerprints found at the crime scene. As a result, the court ordered that he be held in custody without the option for bail. The trial of Zion Teasley began on June 5, 2023, a highly publicized case in the state's history, capturing the attention of the entire nation. Journalists, activists, and concerned citizens gathered outside the courthouse, eager to observe the accused individual. Accompanied by tight security, Zion entered the courtroom in handcuffs, wearing an orange prison outfit, seemingly indifferent. Lauren's family openly displayed their emotions. Her mother wept continuously, while her father glared angrily at the defendant. Friends of the victim, holding her pictures, also attended the proceedings. The prosecutor argued that Zion Teasley was a dangerous and calculated killer who posed a significant danger to society. He emphasized the audacious nature of the crime and the strong evidence against the defendant, portraying Zion as a misogynistic psychopath who took pleasure in causing harm to women. In contrast, Zion's lawyer sought to prove his client's innocence, questioning the presented evidence and suggesting the involvement of another individual in Lauren's death. The defense attorney advised the jury to make their decision based on facts rather than emotions or public opinion, highlighting Zion's difficult upbringing and the harsh treatment he endured in his family. Zion William Teasley currently faces charges of first-degree murder. In December 2023, the Maricopa County Prosecutor's Office pushed for the death penalty, the harshest punishment allowed by Arizona state law for such a serious crime. The Phoenix Police Department concluded their investigation into the case, with the suspect now awaiting trial. There is no information that would indicate that the attack on Lauren Ha was anything other than a random choice of a victim by the perpetrator. Zion Teasley himself does not admit his guilt in committing this brutal murder. He continues to be held in custody without the right to post bail. The trial of the accused is scheduled for October 2025. It is expected that this will be one of the most resonant trials in the history of the state of Arizona. The tragic death of Lauren Heike shook all of America and became a real shock for her family and friends. She, who loved life so much and believed in the goodness of people, became a victim of a cruel and senseless crime. This murder once again reminded society of the importance of public safety and timely response to alarming signals about the inadequate behavior of certain individuals. This story also showed how important the work of law enforcement agencies is, as they were able to promptly find and detain the suspect and gather the necessary evidence of his guilt. Ahead is the judicial review of this case, which should put the final point and determine the measure of responsibility of the murderer. Society hopes that justice will be fair and that the criminal will receive the most severe punishment. Most importantly, the memory of Lauren Heike should live in the hearts of all who knew and loved her. This girl will forever remain young, beautiful, kind, and sincere. Let her story be a warning to everyone. Value life, be careful, and do not be indifferent to those who are near. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Zoe Hastings. Zoe Hastings was born on November 20, 1996, in Kansas. She was the eldest of 5 children, with 3 younger sisters and a brother. Zoe was always available to assist her parents in caring for her siblings, willing to cancel any plans if her parents needed a helping hand. Her parents were deeply religious, so the family spent a considerable amount of time at church. At some point, they relocated to Dallas, where Zoe enrolled in a high school that emphasized creativity and the arts. She had a passion for drawing and also enjoyed participating in school theatrical performances. In her spare time, Zoe worked at an art studio in Dallas. She also worked as a lifeguard at a local pool during the summer after graduating from high school. Zoe had the opportunity to attend some of the top universities in the country. However, she chose to postpone her education and dedicate some time to her church. In October 2015, when Zoe was 18 years old, she was preparing to go on a mission trip for her church and was eagerly looking forward to the journey. On Sunday, October 11th, she planned to attend the Sunday service where they would discuss some details of their upcoming trip. Zoe took the family minivan, promised her parents she'd be back for dinner, and left her house around 4:40 p.m. The church was only a few miles away, and the parents expected her to return around 6:30. However, as time passed, Zoe didn't come back for dinner, which was quite unusual. They sent her several messages, but there was no response. They also tried calling her again with no luck. After some time, they started calling her friends and family members, thinking Zoe might have visited someone after the service, but none of them had seen her that evening. Finally, her parents decided to call the church, and they encountered an unexpected turn of events. Zoe never showed up there. The parents became even more worried and decided to contact the police. Such behavior was highly unusual for their daughter, as she always told them where she was going and never disappeared without any explanation. They called 911, but the officers did not come to their house to take a missing person report, so the parents drove to the police station themselves, filed a report, and began searching for their daughter. They retraced the entire route from home to the church several times, but couldn't find any trace of Zoe. This went on almost all night, and as morning approached, her mother suddenly had an idea. She recalled that her daughter had an iPhone tracking app, which gave them access to her location. They discovered that her phone was just a few hundred yards from the church, near a small creek across the road from it. The parents immediately went to that spot, and to their horror, they saw a lot of police cars, as well as an ambulance and emergency services approaching. One of the officers explained to them that there had been a car accident a few hours ago. The police received a call from a person who was walking their dog, and at one point, a man approached them, saying that there had been a car accident near the creek and a woman was injured. They both ran to the scene, where the witness found this woman in a pool of blood and called 911. Police officers quickly identified the deceased. It was Zoe Hastings. However, they immediately realized that she didn't die as a result of the accident. It was obvious from the first look that she had been a victim of murder. Zoe lay on the ground a few hundred yards from the minivan, which was partially submerged in the creek. There was a lot of blood near her body, and police officers noticed multiple cuts on her neck. Zoe's dress was pulled up, and her underwear was rolled down, leading detectives to assume that the killer likely assaulted her. Zoe's parents tried to approach their daughter, but the officers stopped them, saying they shouldn't witness such a gruesome scene. While investigating the crime scene, officers found several clues. All the minivan doors except the driver's were locked, which could indicate that the perpetrator either drove the vehicle themselves or approached Zoe directly at the scene. A few yards from the creek, near an embankment under the bridge, police found a blood-covered knife, which was likely used as the murder weapon. Zoe's smartphone data assisted the investigators in establishing the timeline of case. The GPS data showed that she arrived at the creek at 5:01 p.m., only 20 minutes after leaving her home, and she was apparently killed within a few minutes of arriving there. The police also discovered that after leaving home, Zoe made one stop. She went to a DVD rental service near her local Walgreens to return a movie. While experts examined the victim's body and all the available evidence, detectives decided to look for potential witnesses who were at the store or nearby at the same time as Zoe. After speaking with dozens of people, they managed to find 2 potential witnesses. The first witness was Lester Clark, who worked at a tattoo parlor next to the store on that day. Around 4:45 p.m., he went to buy cigarettes and saw a woman near the DVD rental service. Shortly after, Lester saw her returning to the parking lot and approaching a white minivan. She tried to open the door, but at that moment, a man approached her, stopped the door with his hand, and said something to her. After that, the woman got into the car and moved to the passenger seat, and the man got into the driver's seat, and they drove away. Lester said that the woman did indeed resemble Zoe, although he didn't think much of the incident as nothing obviously bad seemed to happen. The second witness was a homeless man named Gary Whitman, who shared a similar story. Around 4:45 p.m., when he was across the street from the parking lot, he saw a woman heading towards the white minivan. Suddenly, a man approached her from behind and prevented her from getting into the car. He then took something out of his pocket and showed it to the woman. After that, she got into the car, moved to the passenger seat, and the man got into the driver's seat and drove away. Gary provided a similar description of the suspect and added that the situation struck him as highly suspicious. He went into the store and asked the clerk to call 911, but it's unclear if the clerk complied with his request, as police found no records of this call. While investigators interviewed witnesses, experts made several discoveries. The forensic pathologist examined the victim's body and found traces of male semen, but the amount was so small that conducting a full DNA analysis was simply impossible. This only confirmed that the perpetrator had sexually assaulted the victim before the murder. Investigators also examined the victim's car and couldn't find any foreign fingerprints on either the doors or the steering wheel. Based on witness statements, the suspect could have driven Zoe away from the store parking lot in her minivan, which caught the detectives off guard. However, they didn't rule out the possibility that the killer may have simply wiped down the steering wheel and door handle after the murder. Several hairs were also found on Zoe's body, but experts couldn't extract a full DNA sample from them as they were too small. However, when they examined the knife found near the crime scene, they finally had a breakthrough. A DNA sample was discovered on it, which was immediately uploaded to the FBI database, and police got a match. The sample belonged to 34-year-old Antonio Cochran, a man with a lengthy criminal history dating back to his teenage years. He had been arrested for thefts, assaults, home invasions, and was also suspected of numerous other crimes. The year before these events, in 2014, a 17-year-old daughter of his girlfriend accused Antonio of sexual assault. According to her, he offered her a ride, but when she was in the car, Antonio took her to a wooded area, threatening to kill her if she tried to escape. There, he assaulted her, and the man was arrested. He claimed they had consensual sex, and the case went to court. However, during the trial, the prosecution couldn't provide enough evidence to prove his guilt, so Antonio was found not guilty. With his DNA found on the knife, police identified Antonio as the prime suspect, and he was arrested. During the interrogation, he repeatedly denied any involvement in the murder, so the detectives focused their efforts on finding more evidence. The experts took a DNA sample from Antonio and tried to compare it with the semen and semen found on the victim's body. But since both pieces of evidence were too small to extract a full sample, experts decided to try a different type of analysis. They were able to generate an approximate profile and determine if it definitely did not match the chosen DNA. In other words, this method operates on the principle of exclusion, but it does not yield any precise results and cannot be used as a proof of guilt. They compared these partial profiles from the hair and semen with the suspect's DNA and concluded that their similarity couldn't be excluded. Meanwhile, detectives examined Antonio's smartphone and found several interesting text messages. Putting them together, it became clear that on the day of the murder, he was in a very troubled state of mind. At 1:48 a.m., the day before Zoe's death, he texted a friend he lived with, saying he was moving out and he would never see him again. On the next day, at 2:07 p.m., he texted his ex-girlfriend, telling her that his stepmother died, and he mentioned she died right in front of him, and he was finding it difficult to cope with the loss. Over the next hour, Antonio texted another woman twice, stating he had been drinking all night, driving around the city, and crying. These were his final messages before Zoe's death. Later that evening, at 9:30 p.m., he texted his friend again, expressing confusion about what to do with his life and how things had recently taken a turn for the worse. The next day, he sent another message to his ex-girlfriend, saying his life is over and she would soon find out why. Examining his browser search history, detectives found that Antonio had visited local news websites over 30 times before his arrest, specifically checking the crime sections. 5 of those visits were directly related to articles about Zoe's murder. They also noticed that before her death, he rarely visited news sites. Police only found one page in his browsing history related to gang activity. Antonio's smartphone provided the detectives with another lead. Experts obtained GPS data from a cell phone provider and discovered that at 4:34 p.m., his phone connected to a tower covering the area where the store was located. This coincided with the time Zoe was there, but this data wasn't considered strong evidence. It only indicated that his phone was within a few miles of the tower. Nevertheless, it suggested that Antonio arrived in the area just minutes before Zoe left the parking lot. His home was quite far, and throughout the day, his phone had been connected to a different nearby tower. Detectives also learned that Antonio had started a new job at a grocery store just 3 days before the incident. On Monday, the day after the murder, he didn't show up for his shift without giving any explanation. Despite the extensive list of circumstantial evidence against Antonio, the only strong evidence remained the suspect's DNA on the handle of the knife. However, this could have posed a problem, as such evidence alone is often insufficient for a conviction, because merely holding a knife doesn't prove the act of murder. For instance, he could have used the knife under different circumstances, and someone else might have used it to commit the crime. But detectives couldn't find any other evidence, so they decided to proceed with the case and take it to court. The prosecution presented its version of what happened on that day. When Zoe returned to the parking lot to her car, Antonio approached her, pulled out a knife from his pocket, and threatened her to get in the car. He then took the driver's seat himself and drove away. Based on the messages sent by the suspect before the murder, he was in a distressed emotional state due to the death of a relative and had consumed a significant amount of alcohol. According to the investigator's version, he decided to abduct the victim with the intention of assaulting her. He chose Zoe randomly because she happened to be in the parking lot at that moment, and Antonio simply saw an opportunity to commit the crime. Antonio drove to a nearby creek located in a low-lying, tree-surrounded area, making it difficult to see from any direction. There, he forced the victim out of the car, assaulted her, and inflicted 6 stab wounds to her neck. He then got back into the car and attempted to drive it into the creek, possibly to conceal any remaining evidence in the vehicle. However, the car only partially submerged in the water, so Antonio could have wiped the steering wheel and door handle clean of his fingerprints and fled the scene. According to the testimony of the first witness, he saw a man who looked similar returning to the store's parking lot on foot that evening. The defense argued that the majority of the evidence could hardly be considered even circumstantial. For instance, the partial analysis of hair and semen only indicated that Antonio couldn't be excluded as the source of these samples, but didn't conclusively prove his involvement. Regarding the DNA on the knife, the defense seized upon the fact that this evidence alone didn't establish the fact of the murder. According to their version, Antonio could have come into contact with the knife under different circumstances before working at the store, where he had a job at a movie theater and sometimes had to collect various items left behind by visitors, including knives. However, No evidence was found to support this version, and if someone else had taken the knife from the theater and used it to commit the murder, they would have had to somehow avoid erasing Antonio's DNA from the handle, which would have been quite a challenging task. The defense tried to challenge the credibility of the second witness, Gary, who was a homeless man. They found out that he had an arrest warrant for breaking the conditions of his parole. The defense wanted to remove his testimony from the case, but the prosecution disagreed. They said that Gary coming forward willingly despite the arrest warrant showed his desire to help. Gary himself said he just wanted to do the right thing, even though he knew he would be arrested for it. Antonio's lawyers also tried to convince the jury that at the time of Zoe's murder, their client was elsewhere, helping a friend, but no substantial evidence supporting this version was presented. Initially, the prosecution sought the death penalty for Antonio, but during the trial, it became clear that with the available evidence, this would be highly problematic. Therefore, they abandoned these plans. After prolonged deliberation, the jurors eventually found Antonio guilty of murder, and he was sentenced to life imprisonment with the possibility of parole after 30 years. Zoe's parents thanked the investigators and all the participants in the trial for achieving justice for their daughter. Her father also shared that from a young age, he had warned all his children about the dangers the world might pose to them, and he had exerted all his efforts to protect them. But his eldest daughter was abducted just a few hundred yards from their home, and he couldn't do anything to prevent it. Welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Michelle Lang. Michelle was an intelligent and motivated individual who enrolled in the University of Technology in Sydney, where she studied economics and hospitality management. She was an adventurous person who loved to travel, take risks, and explore new places. Her social media profiles revealed a vibrant personality who enjoyed posting photos and videos of her outings with friends. In the weeks leading up to her disappearance, Michelle posted videos and photos from her trips to various locations in New South Wales. On June 13, 2013, she visited Snapper Point, where she took a prophetic photo of herself on the edge of a cliff. Michelle was confident, outgoing, and had a busy life, balancing her studies with a part-time job and a social life. Michelle Lang went to a mall on April 2, 2016, and boarded a train after lunch. She got off at a station around 4:30 p.m. and was never seen again. 2 days later, her uncle went to the train station to meet his wife, who had returned from a business trip. And that's when they realized Michelle was missing. Her family became worried when they couldn't contact her, as she was always in daily contact with friends and family members living in China and Australia. They inspected her room, which was in complete order, and looked through her laptop, concluding that she hadn't returned from her day out. On April 24, 2016, a body was found by tourists at Snapper Point, and a compiled sketch of the victim confirmed it was Michelle. The police took 3 days to officially identify her and launch an investigation. The first theory was that Michelle had been attacked by an unknown person she had planned to meet that day. However, CCTV cameras showed Michelle was alone on the day of her disappearance, and her friends said she had no plans to meet anyone. An investigation into her social networks and correspondence found no evidence of a secret meeting. The autopsy revealed Michelle's body had multiple injuries, including stab wounds, indicating she had tried to fight off her attacker. The police believe she was brutally assaulted before her death, but it's unclear who could have attacked her in such a lonely area. Forensic evidence showed Michelle's body had been in the water for less than 48 hours, meaning it was likely dumped recently. The police studied CCTV and traffic cameras to determine Michelle's last movements and continued to interview her family members, friends, and co-workers for additional information. Police Inspector Gary Jubelin said Michelle was a responsible person who always stayed in touch with her family, which made her disappearance unusual. The police were suspicious of Derek Barrett, Michelle's uncle, who had been unemployed and often stayed up late, but they found no evidence linking him to the crime. The investigators began questioning Derek about his relationship with Michelle and asked him to recall the last time he had seen her. Under pressure, Derek refused to answer and demanded a lawyer. This suspicious behavior raised doubts, leading to his arrest as a suspect. Before the interrogation, investigators had checked Derek's cell phone signal and found that he was in the same area where Michelle's body was later discovered on April 24th. Surveillance footage from a parking lot also showed a car matching the description of Derek's vehicle in the early morning hours of April 24th. Despite Derek's denials, the footage proved his presence in the parking lot. The police charged Derek, 27, with the murder of 25-year-old Michelle Lang, whose naked body with multiple stab wounds was found in a hole on the central Enniswoth coast. Michelle's family was left in shock, especially her mother, who was devastated by the news. Police released CCTV footage showing Michelle's last shopping trip in Sydney's Central Business District on April 21st. The footage showed her shopping at a Pitt Street mall and boarding a train at St. James Station. Police believe Michelle returned to her family home in the afternoon, where she lived with her uncle, aunt, and cousin. She was presumed to have been murdered at home. The autopsy revealed that Michelle had tried to fight off her attacker and was stabbed multiple times in defense. CCTV footage also captured a vehicle entering Lake Moan-Morrick National Park at around 7 a.m. on April 24th, with Michelle's body believed to be inside. Despite Derek being detained and charged, the investigation continued, and further details of Michelle's final minutes surfaced. Additional charges were laid, including 5 counts of indecent assault, 2 counts of installing a filming device, and murder. The investigation revealed that Derek had an unhealthy sexual interest in his wife's young niece. Analysis of Derek's cell phone found previously deleted data, including files that left no doubt about his involvement in Michelle's death and his unhealthy interest in her. The phone contained images taken just before Michelle's death, showing her returning home on April 21st around 5 p.m. and sending her last text message around midnight. Derek had set up a hidden camera in the shared bathroom, which he regularly reviewed. The phone also contained images of Michelle taken before her death. It appeared that Derek had entered Michelle's room around midnight, attempting to take photos and videos of her while she was asleep. However, Michelle woke up, and Derek attacked her, tying her up and putting duct tape over her mouth. He kept her tied to the bed for 2 days, periodically abusing her and taking photos. Michelle was still alive on April 23rd when Derek took a picture of her around 8 a.m. Later that day, Derek's stepson came home twice but didn't hear Michelle's quiet moans because Derek was taking a shower at the time. Surveillance cameras showed that Derek left the apartment 4 times to take out the trash, presumably after Michelle had already died. During this time, Derek cleaned the house thoroughly, washing away any traces of blood and hiding evidence of the crime and Michelle's disappearance. The next day, April 24th, at 7 a.m., Derek drove to Snapper Point, stopping at a gas station to buy drinks and fill up his car with gas, where he was caught on CCTV cameras. When he arrived at Snapper Point, he got rid of Michelle's body and took some pictures around 9 a.m. Afterwards, he visited his parents, who didn't notice anything unusual about his behavior, and then returned home, waiting for his wife to return. Derek reported that he hadn't seen Michelle and that she hadn't come home, even accompanying his wife to the police station to file a missing persons report. On June 29, 2016, the first court hearing was held, and Derek's lawyer, Bill Whitby, told the court that Derek was pleading not guilty and was as shocked and upset by Michelle's death as the rest of the family. However, it was revealed that Derek had taken illegal drugs the day before killing Michelle, and he claimed to have only vague memories of the 2-hour trip to Snapper Point, where he threw Michelle's body off the cliff. Forensic psychologist Dr. Richard first disputed Derek's claims of memory loss, testifying that Derek was mentally fit to be punished to the full extent of his sentence. Dr. First testified that the drugs Derek was taking did not cause memory loss, and that all of his actions, from the murder to the disposal of the body, were clear and purposeful. The doctor also stated that Derek's IQ, concentration, and memory were within normal limits, and that the number of stab wounds indicated sadistic tendencies rather than memory lapses. The psychologist rejected Derek's claim that he did not feel sexually attracted to the victim and believed that Derek faked amnesia to avoid taking responsibility for the crime. A doctor, Richard, disputed Derek Barrett's claim, stating it was self-defeating because it was clear that the suspect had gained weight during the time period in question. Judge Wilson, a seasoned criminal defense attorney with 30 years of experience, expressed her skepticism about Derek Barrett's behavior in the courtroom, describing it as insincere and akin to that of a psychopath. She believed that Barrett's crime was not the result of a drunken night or poor life choices, but rather a deliberate act. During the retrial hearing, Barrett pleaded guilty to murdering and kidnapping Michelle Lang, as well as sneaking into her room while she slept and making videos. He also admitted taking 19 explicit photos of her shortly before her death. Barrett claimed he couldn't remember the 48-hour period during which he committed the crime because he was under the influence of illegal substances. Judge Wilson, however, did not believe Barrett's claim of memory loss, nor did she believe he was genuinely sorry for his actions. The Lang family consoled each other, while Barrett wiped away tears and said that he deserved to live and that this should never have happened. Judge Wilson sentenced Barrett to 34 years and 6 months in prison with a maximum term of 46 years. He will be eligible for parole in 2050. Barrett showed no emotion when sentenced. Michelle's mother, Mrs. Jiang, thanked the Australian and Chinese communities for their support during her time of grief. She also thanked the Neswati police, including Detective Inspector Gary Jubilan, for investigating her daughter's death. A fund was set up to pay for Miss Lang's funeral and to support her mother when she returns to China. Tragically, Michelle Lang's story did not end there. 4 years after the crime, inexplicable events occurred in one family where a woman often visited her elderly mother. In a surprising discovery, a woman found an unknown USB device in her elderly mother's hands during a visit. When the daughter plugged the USB drive into her computer, she was shocked to find graphic videos and photos of obscene content. The police were contacted, and an investigation revealed that the USB drive contained 9 video files lasting over an hour and 13 files with photos of Michelle Lang being abused shortly before her murder on April 23, 2016. The woman who found the USB drive lived about 4 miles from Derek Barrett's former home and had no discernible connection to him. It remains a mystery where the USB drive came from and how it ended up in the woman's family home. Police were able to match the photos on the USB drive to those that Derek Barrett had deleted from his phone before his arrest in an attempt to hide his crimes. In 2020, Barrett was charged with multiple sex offenses after the disturbing content was found on the USB drive in November 2019. Prosecutors admitted they were stumped by the discovery of the device, which led to new charges. The elderly woman with dementia was confined to her home, and it is unclear how the USB drive ended up in her possession. Thanks to the new evidence, Derek Barrett's sentence was extended without parole. The horrific discovery of the USB drive in the hands of an elderly woman in a leafy Sydney suburb resulted in the convicted criminal receiving additional years of punishment. The story of Michelle Lang stands as a heartbreaking reminder to appreciate the preciousness of life, since the future is uncertain and can change in an instant. After her passing, tributes poured in from friends and acquaintances on Chinese and Australian social media, emphasizing the devastating and lasting effects of bullying, fear, and criminal behavior. Welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Kat West. The case of Kat West, Kat Dawn West. Martin was born on February 15, 1975, in Davie, Florida. She grew up as an only child in a humble and modest family environment with parents Nancy and John Jonathan Martin. As a child, Kat longed for a sibling, but her mother's health issues prevented that from happening. Instead, she became extremely attached to dolls, treating them like they were alive, singing to them, and carrying them around in school. Kat was known for her beauty and outgoing personality, actively participating in sports and dance. However, during her teenage years, she began to show signs of bipolar disorder, which included depression and anxiety, followed by periods of extreme happiness and restlessness. Unfortunately, her parents didn't realize what was happening until later. By that time, Kat had started using alcohol to cope with her emotions. It wasn't until she received treatment for alcoholism that the underlying cause of her problems was discovered. In her 20s, Kat overcame her addiction to alcohol, but managing her bipolar disorder was more difficult. She had to take several strong medications that interacted with each other and caused side effects. Eventually, her disorder was brought under control, but she had to continue taking medication for the rest of her life. Sadly, her life was cut short. Kat dreamed of a traditional life with a husband, children, and a family, but her personal struggles with a psychological disorder and alcohol issues made it challenging. Despite these difficulties, she was a popular and lively person who loved being the center of attention. Kat had aspirations to become a model and would attend castings, trying out different looks. Her idol was Marilyn Monroe, whom she admired greatly. She watched Monroe's movies repeatedly, collected posters, and imitated her style and image. Interestingly, Kat bore a resemblance to Monroe, which she happily exploited and treasured. Although Kat never became a famous model, her photos regularly appeared in local magazines, earning her some recognition and a small following. People would occasionally recognize her on the streets of her hometown. At the age of 28, she finally met the man she would start a family with, William West. William Jeffrey West, who goes by his middle name Jeffrey, was born in 1970 in Alabama, where he grew up in an ordinary family. As a child, Jeffrey envisioned a future in the military or law enforcement. He was an excellent student, enthusiastic about sports, and physically fit. In the early 1990s, Jeffrey enlisted in the U.S. military, starting as a military police officer. His commitment led him to become a recruiter, responsible for recruiting new members into the Army and Navy. He eventually became the head of a recruitment division. Throughout his life, Jeffrey dedicated 20 years to serving in the military. William balanced his military career with higher education, earning a bachelor's degree in public relations from the University of South Carolina, and later a master's degree in criminal justice and disaster and emergency management. He was intelligent, composed, and goal-oriented, yet modest and somewhat introverted, preferring quiet gatherings to loud parties and shunning the spotlight. After marrying young, he became a devoted family man and responsible parent to 2 children. After retiring from the military, William joined the police department of a university town as a corporal, tasked with ensuring campus safety. He took his duties seriously and responsibly, although he never had to use his issued service firearm throughout his career. Kat and Jeffrey, an unlikely couple, met in the mid-2000s. At the time, Jeffrey was still serving in the military and married to his first wife. Despite their differences, Jeffrey being a stern, quiet military man and Kat being a flamboyant, bold attention seeker, they felt an instant attraction. Their differences, including their 5-year age gap, Jeffrey's existing marriage, and Kat's struggles with alcoholism, did not deter their relationship. Jeffrey filed for divorce shortly after meeting Kat, and in a whirlwind romance, they got married in a Las Vegas chapel just 5 months later in 2005. They had a daughter, Lola, and settled in Sarah, Alabama, Jeffrey's hometown, in a cozy custom-built home designed by Kat herself. The bedroom was a shrine to her idol, Marilyn Monroe, with numerous portraits adorning the walls. Despite their vastly different personalities, the Wests were known to their neighbors as a happy couple. Kat, who preferred to be called Caitlin, was a fashionista who reveled in attention. She took great care in her appearance, always donning bold makeup, stylish hair, and fashionable outfits that drew admiration. She beamed with joy, perpetually smiling, and thrived on compliments. In stark contrast, Jeffrey appeared reserved, serious, and disciplined, traits likely shaped by his lengthy military career, and often seemed overshadowed by Kat's vibrant personality. Kat struggled to succeed as a model after getting married and having a daughter. Instead, she focused on being a homemaker, but she felt unfulfilled and craved attention. With the rise of social media, Kat started posting photos online, initially harmless pictures inspired by Barbie and Marilyn Monroe. Over time, her posts became more provocative. Sources close to the couple say that Kat's husband didn't object to her new hobby and even helped her by taking photos. This turned into a profitable venture for Kat through paid subscriptions. The couple was seen buying seafood dishes, fine wine, and candles to set a romantic mood, captured on surveillance cameras. They appeared happy and carefree, joking and smiling, with no sign of the tragedy to come. After dinner, Kat, who had previously struggled with alcohol dependence, became her online persona, Kitty Cat, under the influence of the drinks. She asked her husband Jeff to take sultry photos, first in lingerie and then nude. Jeff agreed and took several revealing shots which were posted on Kat's private profile for fans only. By around 1 p.m., what was supposed to be a romantic evening escalated into a tragic nightmare. The next morning, January 13th, around 5 a.m., a young neighbor of the Wests headed to work. Although the sun hadn't risen, it was light enough outside for her to notice something unusual as she passed the Wests' house. At first, she wasn't sure what she was seeing, but as she slowed down, she realized with horror that an almost fully naked woman was lying motionless on the road. A woman witnessed someone standing on the doorstep of a house, but they vanished when they saw her. She couldn't determine if they entered the house or fled down the street. She was startled and uncertain, so she didn't approach the body right away. Instead, she went home, informed her parents, and together they called emergency services to report their discovery. At the operator's request, the family returned to the scene and examined the body. They identified it as Mrs. West, but unfortunately there was no pulse. Her body was cold, and rigor mortis had set in. Mrs. West's body lay face down on the sidewalk, wearing only a pink bra top. A blood-stained pool had formed beneath her head, and a bottle of absinthe with bloodstains was nearby. Her damaged smartphone lay a short distance away. Since the area was quiet and residential, there were no other witnesses that night. This left a mystery about what happened between 8:30 p.m., when the West's car was last seen, and 5 a.m., when the body was discovered. The only person who might know what happened is Mr. West, but is he hiding something? Detective Michael Melhoff was one of the first to arrive at the scene of the crime. He went to the house where her body was found and spoke to the man who answered the door. The man appeared anxious but claimed he didn't know what was going on. When the detective asked him where his wife was, the man said he had just woken up and couldn't find her in bed. The detective then asked the man to step outside, where he told him that her body had been found nearby, identified by neighbors as Kat West. The man put on a jacket and followed the detective, confirming that the body was indeed his wife. However, his reaction was surprisingly calm. He didn't rush to the body or show any signs of distress. When questioned about his actions the previous night, the man said he had slept soundly after a night of drinking. When asked what he thought might have happened to his wife, he simply shrugged and suggested it could have been an accident. The man also mentioned that his wife had bipolar disorder and struggled with alcoholism, which sometimes led to erratic behavior. He said that she would occasionally use their backyard trampoline, sometimes injuring herself when she missed it. A search of the house found no signs of a struggle or violence, but it did reveal evidence of a night of drinking, with 2 plates of leftover food, 2 glasses, and a half-empty brandy bottle on the kitchen table. The police found Jeffrey's wife's high heels under the table and her matching underwear on the floor, but some suspicious items caught their attention: blood-stained napkins in the trash and an open bottle of cleaner. Jeffrey was arrested as the main suspect that day. He told investigators that he and his wife Kat had a tumultuous evening. After a photo shoot, Jeffrey wanted to move to the bedroom for a more intimate setting. He left to take a shower and returned to find Kat still sitting at the table, drinking straight from the bottle and texting on her phone. This infuriated Jeffrey, and he asked her to put the phone away, but she refused. When he tried to take it from her, they had a small struggle, during which he accidentally elbowed her face, causing a few drops of blood to appear from her nose. Jeffrey claimed that this was the blood the police found on the napkins. He said he eventually took the phone from Kat and threw it out the door into the darkness. Then, he went to bed, thinking Kat would soon calm down and join him. He allegedly had no idea what happened next until the police knocked on his door, asking about Kat. Mr. West proposed several theories to explain his wife's disappearance and death. One possibility was that she went outside to find her phone, taking the absinthe bottle with her to finish it. In this scenario, she might have fallen, hit her head on the bottle, lost consciousness, and frozen to death. Alternatively, someone might have attacked her. Mr. West also found it puzzling that his wife was not wearing the bottom part of her pink lingerie set, and that she had gone outside in just a bra, without putting on any outerwear that was readily available near the entrance. He attributed these unusual actions to her being intoxicated from alcohol. The suspect's story raised suspicions due to its inconsistencies and suspicious omissions. He claimed to be too drunk to recall certain details, leaving investigators to reconstruct the sequence of events. Although there were no witnesses, the evidence suggested that the 42-year-old woman died from a blow to the head, likely caused by the absinthe bottle found nearby, which was compounded by hypothermia. The autopsy revealed that the victim's blood alcohol level was extremely high, indicating severe intoxication that would have impaired her coordination and increased her risk of losing consciousness. At first, the evidence seemed to support a simple explanation. The heavily intoxicated victim had gone outside to look for her phone, taking the unfinished bottle of absinthe with her. She likely lost her balance, fell, hit her head on the bottle, lost consciousness, and died from her injuries and exposure. However, the investigation found this scenario too convenient and suspiciously staged. Although the bottle with blood traces was found next to the victim's head and her smartphone was nearby, forensic analysis cast doubt on the idea that she had fallen and hit her head by herself. If that were the case, the bottle would likely have rolled away from her head, not remained alongside it. Kat's and her husband Jeff's fingerprints were found on a bottle, along with some unidentifiable smudged prints. The presence of blood-stained napkins and an opened bottle of household cleaner in the house led investigators to conclude that the couple had a violent argument. According to the theory presented in court, Kat's obsession with her online subscribers sparked the fight. In a fit of rage, Jeff allegedly struck Kat with the bottle, causing a fatal injury. Panicked, he attempted to make it look like an accidental fall by cleaning up the blood, but he failed to dispose of the evidence. The fitness app on Jeff's phone supported this theory, as it showed he was active in the house until midnight and again early in the morning before the police arrived, contradicting his claim of being asleep. The police believed Jeff was trying to conceal evidence during these periods. A neighbor who discovered Kat's body remembered seeing a male figure on the doorstep who quickly left in an unknown direction in the early morning darkness. However, she couldn't confirm whether it was Jeff or someone else, nor could she say whether the person entered the house or not. The investigators were intrigued by the online presence of the deceased, who had many male admirers paying to see her revealing photos as Kitty Cat. This led them to consider the possibility of an obsessed follower among her subscribers, someone who might have tried to track her down for a personal encounter. The victim, a middle-aged homemaker, regularly received messages from men, some of which were inappropriate. However, she kept her distance, and there were no explicit threats or harassment. A few persistent fans from other states with solid alibis were quickly cleared as suspects. Despite this, mysterious footprints were found on the doorstep that didn't belong to the homeowners, but they vanished on the lawn, leaving their origin unknown. Jeffrey West's neighbors, friends, and family described the couple as happy and content, with Jeffrey aware of his wife Kat's online activities, which he viewed as harmless. However, their social circle was unaware of Kat's online persona, Kitty Cat, just as most of her followers didn't know her real identity. When asked if he had ever been violent towards Kat, Jeffrey denied it, saying he loved her too much to harm her. Despite this, the couple frequently argued, including a heated exchange on January 12th, in which Kat questioned their compatibility due to their differing personalities. Although Jeffrey remained the prime suspect based on forensic evidence and circumstantial details, his family, including his parents, daughter, and in-laws, were convinced of his innocence, adamant that he could never harm Kat. Jeffrey West was arrested and unable to post the $500,000 bail, so he remained in custody for nearly 3 years until his trial. During this time, he was offered a plea deal, which would have reduced his sentence if he admitted to killing his wife. However, he refused the deal, maintaining his innocence. The trial, which began in November 2020, received significant media attention due to Kat's online fame. This publicity put a lot of pressure on the judges and jurors. By this point, the possibility of someone else being involved in Kat's death was no longer considered. The prosecution argued that all the evidence pointed to Jeffrey West as the killer. They believed that in a fit of jealousy, and while under the influence of alcohol, he hit his wife with a bottle, causing fatal injuries. In a panic, they suggested that he then staged the scene to look like an accident and removed evidence from the house. Jeffrey's defense team, on the other hand, argued that Kat's death was indeed an accident. They cited her extremely high blood alcohol levels, which they believed affected her balance and coordination. Kat's mother gave a heartfelt testimony in support of her son-in-law, describing her daughter as eccentric, but emphasizing that Jeffrey loved her deeply and would never harm her. She also asked the court to consider the well-being of their granddaughter, Lola, who had already lost her mother and now risked losing her father as well. After deliberating, the jury delivered a guilty verdict for involuntary manslaughter on January 11, 2021. Jeffrey received the maximum sentence of 13 years, including time served. It's worth noting that if he had accepted the initial plea deal, he might have already been released from prison. Hey detectives, welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Rowena Irani. Rowena Irani was born on February 18, 1994, in Karachi, Pakistan, to parents Tarun and Bam Irani. In 2004, when Rowena was 10 years old, her family moved to Wichita, Kansas, in search of better opportunities. The goal was to provide Rowena and her older brother, Rashid, with a brighter future in America. However, the 9.11 tragedy 3 years earlier had created a climate of prejudice that affected the Irani family, making it difficult for Rowena and Rashid to form friendships due to the hostility they faced. Despite the initial difficulties, Rowena and Rashid eventually settled in and expanded their social circle. Rowena joined her high school's ROTC program and drill team, which helped her develop skills, even though she didn't plan to pursue a military career. After a tough start, Rowena blossomed into a strong-willed, friendly, and caring individual. Rowena graduated from Wichita Heights High School in 2012 and enrolled at Wichita State University. choosing to live at home while pursuing a degree in psychology. Her goal was to earn a master's degree and become a counselor for teenagers. Rowena's mother was extremely proud of her dedication to her studies. From the start, the Irani family's sacrifices clearly had a positive impact on their children. Rowena, in particular, wanted to help others reach their full potential. She started working at the Wichita Children's Home, a place for neglected, abused, and emotionally distressed youth. Rowena formed strong bonds with the children, showing her remarkable ability to understand and support them. Rowena made the children feel welcome and cherished, creating a sense of security. Every morning, Rowena would gently wake the children, and every evening, she would bid them farewell. The children looked forward to sharing their daily experiences with her, no matter how small. Rowena also helped the children set goals and find ways to achieve them, showing her dedication to their well-being. Rowena demonstrated a strong commitment to helping troubled youth. And her outstanding academic record as a psychology major indicated she had found her purpose in supporting others. She seemed to be living the American dream her parents had sought. However, problems in her personal life soon arose, ultimately leading to a tragic outcome. In May 2016, Rowena reconnected with Dane Owens, a family friend, at her brother's wedding. Dane came from a wealthy Kansas family and had joined the U.S. Army after high school. His military service ended abruptly due to a severe traumatic brain injury from an explosion. After a medical discharge, Dane attended Kansas State University, where he met Rowena. They soon developed strong feelings for each other. But problems soon arose due to Dane's behavior. He was possessive, controlling, and had a quick temper. People close to Rowena said that Dane became obsessed with the idea of marrying her and starting a family right away, even though she wasn't sure about it. At 22, Rowena wanted to finish college before making such a big decision. Dane's insistence on marriage and his intense behavior scared Rowena, her feel like the relationship was moving too fast. When she asked for space, Dane wrote a disturbing letter, begging her not to leave him and hinting that he might harm himself if she did. This led Rowena to end the relationship. At first, it seemed like Dane accepted Rowena's decision when she reiterated that she wasn't ready for marriage or starting a family. However, just 1 week after giving her space, Dane started pressuring her again about getting engaged, planning a wedding, and having kids. His actions made it clear that he saw Rowena as a prize to be won. Instead of supporting her education and career, Dane seemed determined to limit Rowena to a domestic role. Rowena is worried about her relationship with Dane because she feels he is too controlling of her, and this makes her wonder if they are really a good couple. By September 2016, Dane's increasing aggression had become alarming, prompting Rowena to confide in her brother, Rashid, a police officer. She shared several disturbing incidents, including Dane's claims of committing brutal killings during his military service. He even bragged about murdering women and children while deployed in Afghanistan. Rowena found these revelations deeply disturbing. Furthermore, Dane had expressed his intention to kill an ex-girlfriend who had ended their relationship. He confessed that following the breakup, he became consumed by a desire for revenge and struggled with emotional instability, to the point where he even contemplated committing murder. Rashid agreed with Rowena's assessment that Dane posed a genuine threat and he seemed capable of violent acts against her. On September 23, Rowena ended her relationship with Dane. She blocked his phone number and social media profiles to distance herself. However, Dane refused to accept the breakup and started planning his revenge. Despite recovering from shoulder surgery and being unable to handle a firearm properly, Dane bought a .45 caliber handgun. On October 3, over a week after the breakup, he secretly visited Rowena's residence while her family was away. Surveillance cameras caught him parking his vehicle away from the house and approaching stealthily, hiding the firearm in a sling due to his injured arm. Dane entered the house through an unlocked door and waited for Rowena. When Rowena appeared, he aimed his gun and fatally shot her in the head. This was a deliberate and carefully planned violent act committed by someone who was excessively controlling. After shooting Rowena, Dane quickly left the house through the back door and drove away to avoid being caught. During his escape, he stopped to get rid of important evidence, including the handgun magazine and Rowena's phone, in various ponds in Wichita. Meanwhile, Rowena was left alone in her home, severely injured and bleeding heavily, for several hours. At around 4 p.m., her mother, Tarun, returned home after being dropped off from work. Tarun was worried because Rowena usually picked her up. But she couldn't reach Rowena by phone. She got a ride from a coworker and went home, where she found Rowena lying motionless on the floor, surrounded by a large amount of blood, with severe head injuries. Tarun immediately called for emergency services, but it was too late to save Rowena. Rowena's condition was extremely serious due to a gunshot wound and significant blood loss. She fought for her life at Wesley Medical Center for nearly 24 hours, while her family stayed by her side, hoping for a miracle. Tragically, she passed away on October 4th at just 22 years old. Her promising life was tragically ended by a violent act. Despite their intense grief, Rowena's family was determined to find justice for her murder. Rashid quickly focused the investigation on Dane, Rowena's ex-boyfriend, who had been causing her a great deal of fear before her death. Dane was soon found and brought in for questioning. After being arrested and taken to the police station, he admitted to holding a grudge against Rowena for breaking up with him. When questioned further, Dane tried to claim that Rowena's death was an accident, but the evidence proved this was not true. Dane told investigators that he had shown up at Rowena's home unannounced, carrying a loaded .45 caliber pistol and hoping to talk about getting back together. However, Dane claimed that the firearm was hidden in his arm sling and he never intended to threaten or harm Rowena when he entered the house looking for her. He said when Rowena suddenly appeared, he was startled, causing a moment of panic due to post-traumatic stress disorder from time in the military. Dane alleged that he accidentally fired a shot in her direction. He explained to detectives that he was left shocked and horrified after the bullet accidentally struck Rowena in the head, resulting in her immediate collapse to the ground. Panicked, he fled the scene and later got rid of the evidence. Despite his claim that the shooting was an accident caused by a reflex, detectives did not believe him. The security footage and his admission of sneaking up on Rowena with a loaded gun, his attempt to dispose of evidence, and the execution-style gunshot wound to Rowena's head all suggested a planned and deliberate murder. In November 2018, Dane Owens stood trial for Rowena's murder after years of delays, with the case being heard by a jury. The prosecution presented case with substantial evidence, leaving no doubt about Dane's guilt. They portrayed Dane as a possessive and controlling individual who turned violent when rejected. Dane's delusional fantasies led him to end Rowena's life. After only 3 hours of deliberation, the jury found Dane guilty of first-degree murder and aggravated burglary, resulting in a life sentence in Kansas. Dane was punished for taking Rowena's life due to his wounded pride. He will not be eligible for parole for 25 years, and his chances of release are low due to the brutality of his actions. He is currently serving his sentence at the Hutchinson Correctional Facility in Hutchinson, Kansas. Rowena's life was ended by someone she once loved. It's heartbreaking to think of the terrible actions of Dane, who took Rowena's life, depriving her of a bright future at such a young age. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Megan Landowski. Megan Landowski lived with her family in Portsmouth, Virginia, a bustling seaport town. Her family included her father, Chris Short, a Navy officer, her mother, Angela, and 2 other siblings. Chris Short had been transferred to a naval hospital in Portsmouth after a year stationed at Guantanamo Bay in Cuba. Chris's family felt relieved when they moved there. Megan Landowski, 16 years old, was the oldest in the family. When her family moved, she quickly signed up for dance classes. Megan had a deep passion for dance and showed outstanding talent from the beginning. She started with ballet and then expanded into many different genres. Megan's mother described her as a beautiful, friendly, and talented girl. Megan adapted quickly to her new learning environment at Woodrow Wilson High School. She had an attractive personality and easily made friends with her classmates. Although she attended a prestigious high school that specialized in dance, Megan wanted to attend a regular high school so she could hang out with friends in her neighborhood. She was described as vivacious and kind, with a natural tendency to connect with people. On Thursday, April 10, 2008, Megan woke up early to go to school. She chatted with her mother about the upcoming test before going to class. After saying goodbye to Angela, Megan went to school. Angela had no idea that this would be the last time she would see her daughter alive. Megan's school day ended early, and she went home. Angela had told Megan that she expected Megan's call when she got home. Upon arriving, Megan left a voicemail detailing how her day went, reassuring Angela that she had returned safely, and ending by telling Angela she loved her. Then she continued to prepare lunch for herself. However, things took a terrifying and disturbing turn around 4 p.m. Megan's stepfather, Chris, returned home and found the door open. Although he didn't worry at first, he knew Megan had been warned about leaving the door open, so he trusted that she wouldn't leave it unattended like that. He called her name, but there was only silence. When he entered the kitchen, he was faced with a horrifying sight: Megan lying motionless on the floor. Chris quickly called the police and reported the incident. Local detective Doug Funkhauser suddenly received an alarming call reporting the murder of a young girl in town. Immediately, he rushed to the location of the crime, Roberts Court in Portsmouth. When he approached the scene of the crime, he saw horrifying signs. The bloodstains on the door handle were very clear. When he entered the kitchen, he discovered a gruesome scene. The body of a young girl lay on the floor, her body seriously injured. Megan had suffered multiple stab wounds on her back, neck, face, and throat, and her mouth was sealed with tape. For Detective Doug, this case was one of the most brutal cases he had ever investigated. An initial investigation revealed no signs of forced entry. However, a leaf found inside the home matched a bush outside a first-floor window, suggesting that the killer may have entered through that window. In the upstairs bedroom, signs of a struggle were evident on the bed. Megan's underwear was on the floor, and a box of duct tape was found under the left corner of the bed, appearing to match the tape used to bind Megan's hands and face. Forensic experts found blood on the tape and other items, which were collected for further analysis, including pillows, sheets, and blankets. Additional forensic testing indicated that the bedroom was the scene of the sexual assault, as traces of the killer's semen were found on Megan's comforter and underwear. These findings suggested that Megan had been assaulted in the bedroom before the attack downstairs. Megan was found with a large number of injuries, 43 stab wounds, including 11 post-mortem. The forensic team also reported that Megan was naked from the waist down, with her hands bound behind her back with duct tape. The murder weapon was determined to be a missing kitchen knife. Investigators later found the knife in the sink and determined that the initial attack had occurred in the bedroom, but Megan had somehow escaped down the stairs. Investigators discovered that the perpetrator left footprints during the crime and then washed his hands in the kitchen sink. A second knife used in the crime was discovered in a nearby drain. Detectives quickly searched the neighborhood for witnesses, but no one provided any useful information. The killer appeared to have escaped undetected during the day. After the shock of their daughter's murder, Angela and Chris quickly alerted the police to their suspicions regarding the identity of the killer. They suspected an old acquaintance with a troubled past and believed he may be involved in the case. This person is Robert Hickey, a former colleague of Chris's in the Navy who had sexually assaulted Megan when she was 16. Chris and Robert had worked together as technicians and had become close friends, often inviting Robert and his family to their home. Megan's behavior changed dramatically after the abuse. She became withdrawn, and her grades began to decline. Chris noticed the change and asked her what was wrong, but she was initially reluctant to talk about it. Eventually, Megan confided in Chris, revealing that Robert had been sexually assaulting her in secret. Chris was furious and immediately cut off ties with the Hickeys. He also reported the abuse to the authorities. Around the same time, Megan's parents filed a lawsuit against Robert, just 5 months before she was murdered. The trial is pending, and Megan is expected to testify against him. Robert has a lot at stake, including his reputation and his freedom. Megan expressed concern that Robert might try to harm her to prevent her from testifying, and unfortunately, it appears that her fears have come true. When police searched Robert's home, they did not find any direct evidence linking him to Megan's murder. However, upon closer inspection of his computer, they discovered that he had attempted to erase the hard drive. Investigators were able to recover a recently deleted file containing sexually explicit images of minors. This discovery led to Robert being charged with possession of child pornography and becoming the prime suspect in Megan's murder. He was brought in for questioning, and authorities hope that he will confess to the crime. Robert was visibly nervous throughout the interview, but he insisted that he was at the Navy base on the day of Megan's murder. He denied any involvement and claimed he had not left the base. However, after verifying his alibi with his colleagues, the police discovered a gap in his timeline, raising the possibility that he might have been involved in the murder. The police obtained surveillance footage from the base but found no evidence that Robert had left. Despite this, he remained a suspect. To investigate further, a DNA sample was taken from Robert to compare with the DNA found at the crime scene. The results showed no match, ruling out Robert as the killer. This discovery left the police without any leads or suspects, leaving them frustrated. They then turned their attention to Chris, who had discovered Megan's body. After taking a DNA sample from Chris, he was quickly cleared. Megan's family members, including her younger brother, Corey, were also ruled out as suspects. The autopsy revealed that the murder was extremely brutal, indicating that the perpetrator had used extreme violence against Megan. Given Megan's popularity and gentle nature, it was difficult to narrow the investigation based on hostile relationships. This made the identity of the killer even more mysterious. The investigation into Megan's case did not produce any suspects. Detectives focused on Megan's life at school and interviewed each of her friends. Megan's best friend was interviewed but did not provide any useful information. Police then spoke to other friends and acquaintances from Woodrow Wilson High School and learned that Megan had dated a few people but nothing too serious. Although these men did not appear to be suspects, police asked them to provide DNA samples as a precaution. Meanwhile, experts retested DNA from the crime scene, which suggested that the killer was likely an African American male. For 6 months, no major developments were made, but that changed when a helpful classmate provided valuable information, a list of boys with whom Megan had occasionally flirted. Police looked through the list and found that they had spoken to all of the boys on the list, except for one, a 17-year-old named Robert Lee Barnes. Megan and Robert Barnes were both in the performing arts program at Churchill High School. Megan confided in her friend that she believed Robert might have a crush on her. At school, Robert was considered an excellent violinist, and as a student, he had always earned good grades, exhibited exemplary behavior, and had no disciplinary problems. As one of Megan's friends, Robert visited Megan's home several times, showing respectful behavior during these visits, and Megan's parents were very fond of him. When the police questioned Robert about Megan, he described her as a kind and pleasant person and was shocked that someone would want to harm her. He mentioned that he and Megan had attended shows together and occasionally hung out. However, towards the end of the interview, Robert's demeanor changed when he was asked to provide a DNA sample. Unlike Megan's other classmates, who were cooperative with the request, Robert hesitated and then refused, which aroused the suspicion of the investigators. Robert said that his mother did not allow the DNA test, but the police informed him that his parents' permission was not required because he was almost 18 years old. However, Robert still refused. This refusal made the investigators feel uncomfortable and suspicious that something was wrong with Robert. Therefore, after the interview ended, the investigators suggested that he talk to his mother and try again. The day after the initial investigation, Robert contacted the authorities to request a meeting. When asked if he had obtained his mother's permission, he replied that he had not, but he had given them a piece of his chewing gum as a DNA sample. Robert removed the gum from his mouth, placed it in a rubber glove, and gave it to the investigators. Despite this, the investigators remained suspicious of Robert. The DNA lab then contacted the detective to inquire about the sample's source. After confirming that Robert had indeed placed the gum in the glove, the lab questioned whether he had been continuously monitored while providing the gum. This investigation was prompted by the surprising fact that the DNA on the gum matched that of a woman. It turned out that Robert had switched the gum he was chewing with another piece before handing it to the investigators. On October 23, 2008, Robert was called in for questioning again, this time with his mother. When confronted with the DNA findings, Robert was asked about the chewing gum. He made a critical mistake by stating, "This happened on Thursday." Up until that point, none of the individuals interviewed by the police knew the exact date and time of the murder. When the officers pointed this out to Robert, he provided an implausible explanation. According to Robert, on that Thursday, Megan had asked him to visit her home. Upon his arrival, Robert claimed to have found Megan being held at gunpoint by a masked individual. The alleged attacker held the gun to Robert, forcing him to tie Megan up. Robert then fabricated a story that he had been compelled to sexually assault Megan. He further claimed that they all went downstairs, where the attacker stabbed Megan after obtaining a knife. Ultimately, Robert stated that the attacker had forced him to inflict an injury on himself to ensure his blood would be present at the crime scene. Robert fabricated a false story to portray himself as the victim and to explain away any incriminating evidence. However, the police did not believe his account. When presented with evidence of footprints found at the scene, the investigator asked Robert why only his footprints were found and not those of the person he claimed had attacked him. Robert's mother intervened, telling Robert to stop talking and asserting that Robert was a good and innocent person. The police then took a DNA sample from Robert. The DNA analysis showed a match between Robert's DNA and the DNA found at the crime scene. As a result, Robert Barnes was arrested for the murder of Megan Landowski. According to police, Robert likely broke into the house through a window that afternoon, surprising Megan in her bedroom. He then attacked her, and when she tried to escape downstairs, he chased her, stabbing her multiple times with a kitchen knife, even after she was dead. After the crime, Robert left the scene and continued his life as if nothing had happened. Investigators believe that Robert became unhealthily obsessed with Megan, who only wanted a friendship. When Robert's romantic advances were rejected, he turned to coercion, which led to a tragic end. In September 2009, Robert accepted a plea deal that allowed him to be tried as a juvenile, despite having just turned 18. He pleaded guilty to first-degree murder and aggravated sexual assault. As a result, Robert Lee Barnes was sentenced to 42 years in prison and is currently serving his sentence at Red Onion State Prison in Wise County, Virginia. Regardless of the motive behind Robert's actions, whether it was love, lust, bitterness, or the pain of rejection, none of these reasons justify his horrific crimes against the person he claimed to love and care for. Robert chose the path of destruction, taking the life of an innocent person and ruining his own life.